The chilling echo of their last, brutal encounter with the Majin ruler still resonated. A demonic entity they had managed to cripple, tearing away one of its powerful arms and scarring it deeply before it vanished back into the shadows. The relief that washed over the three companions, Eric, the heroic warrior, Galen, the steadfast fighter, and Luck, the enigmatic magician, was palpable. After an arduous, protracted journey through a foreign dimension, the thought of returning home, of reuniting with the families they had left behind, was a sweet promise on the horizon. Galen, ever the more grounded of the trio, tried to draw Luck into conversation, but the magician's gaze was lost, fixed upon the grotesque trophy clutched in his hand, the Majin's severed limb. What secrets might it hold? What power could it possess? Galen, with a sigh, gently chided Luck for his ceaseless devotion to his craft, a dedication so profound it often seemed to eclipse his awareness of personal connections. But for Luck, the notion of such a concern appeared utterly alien, a concept he simply couldn't grasp. They stood poised at the precipice of the interdimensional rift, ready to step back into their own world, when the ground trembled. Behind them, the Majin ruler's army materialized, a terrifying host hot on their heels. Eric, the hero, looked back, his face etched with disbelief at the sheer number of foes still swarming in pursuit. Luck, assessing their grim reality, knew the truth. They were all grievously wounded. To continue this fight, to engage this endless tide, would undoubtedly spell their end. Yet the greater mission loomed. The Majin ruler had not been fully vanquished, and Eric's unique power would be absolutely vital for that ultimate confrontation. In a move that stunned his comrades, Luck urged them to abandon him, to retreat through the rift while they still could. Eric and Galen, naturally, protested, but Luck's voice cut through their objections, a sharp reminder of the loved ones awaiting them. He implored them to escape, promising with a conviction that only he could muster that he would follow soon. With heavy hearts and desperate urgency, the two men sprinted towards the rapidly closing portal, leaving Luck to face the approaching horde alone. The rift sealed behind them, a shimmering scar against the dimensional fabric. Then Luck launched his assault, a lone sentinel vowing to protect both Eric and Galen, even from across the cosmic divide. He fought, an endless dance against the Majin army, losing all sense of the countless enemies he felled, the stream of defeated foes blurring into an indistinguishable mass. After an indeterminate stretch of time, an eternity perhaps, the Majin army's commander finally appeared, initiating a furious, climactic showdown. In a fleeting moment of vulnerability, the commander seized Luck, unleashing a chilling touch that began to siphon his very life force. As his vitality waned, nearing its absolute depletion, a sudden, miraculous notification pierced his consciousness. Learning complete. What unfolded next was truly astonishing. Luck not only gained the ability to wield the Majin commander's life-transferring, draining touch as his own formidable power, but he immediately turned it back upon her. This unique skill, you see, was far more than a simple attack. It allowed him to drain the mystical energy from his adversaries while simultaneously rejuvenating his own magical reserves and even restoring his health. The notification of learning complete itself was the activation of an ancient, powerful technique, an ability that granted instant mastery over any magic he encountered, struck with, or observed, requiring no prior study or training whatsoever. Once the Majin army commander fell, Luck claimed her sword, marveling at the effortless flow of magical energy through its blade. A grim, satisfied grin spread across his face. With his mana fully restored and this potent new weapon in hand, he knew he possessed the strength to continue his battle for years to come. Meanwhile, back in their own reality, a young girl peered thoughtfully from her window. Her mother's gentle voice called, urging her to bed, promising to douse the lights. The child, with an innocent certainty, voiced a hunch that monsters might emerge later that night. Her mother, however, offered a comforting reassurance, speaking of the great sage who watched over their land, a guardian against such fears. As Luck continued his seemingly endless war against the Majin, time dissolved into a blur. He lost all track of how long it had been since his companions had fled. Should weariness ever threaten to consume him, he had a dark art at his disposal, a spell known as Marionette. Originally designed to control enemies, he repurposed it, casting it upon himself. This allowed him to manipulate his own body, to keep fighting even as sleep threatened, twisting his own limbs to his will. Such extended periods within the interdimensional rift began to erode his very sense of self, a profound isolation that ironically only heightened his emotional response when the Majin ruler finally reappeared. The moment he laid eyes upon that formidable foe, the core of his mission rekindled, a stark reminder of the task he had yet to fulfill before he could truly rejoin his friends. The Majin ruler, now sporting a newly regenerated arm, was prepared for a fierce engagement. It swung its massive sword, but Luck, his eyes alight with a newfound excitement, effortlessly evaded the strike. He spoke of having mastered combat against high-class Majin within the rift, a decade of endless struggle honed into precision. He quickly devised a cunning strategy, luring the ruler closer with a barrage of potent fire and sorcery. Just as the Majin ruler lunged to seize him, Luck cleverly employed his clothing as a decoy, shedding it in a swift maneuver to appear behind the colossal entity and activate his life-transferring, draining touch. However, a magical barrier shimmered, shielding the Majin ruler from the skill's full effect. Seizing this unexpected opportunity, the monster landed a vicious slash, wounding Luck. It followed up with a powerful downward sword strike which, despite Luck's desperate attempt to block, shattered the blade he had acquired from the Majin commander, inflicting further injury. Yet, Luck refused to yield. In an instant, he triggered his flame prison ability, coupling it with a grand scale, life-transferring, draining touch. The battle raged, an intense and engaging spectacle as Luck immersed himself in the blazing inferno. He, too, felt the scorching heat, but it did not deter him from consistently siphoning the Majin's life force. After all, the Majin ruler's magical barrier demanded constant magical energy to withstand the fiery prison, making it only a matter of time before Luck's life-draining touch would break through. A mischievous grin stretched across Luck's face as he provoked the Majin ruler, inquiring whether it preferred to be reduced to ashes within the fiery confines or to have its very life force slowly siphoned away. The tension in this blazing showdown became almost unbearable. A little while later, Luck emerged from the ashes, triumphantly victorious. His eyes caught the Majin sword, firmly lodged in the scorched ground, and a wide grin of pure joy spread across his face. He was ecstatic, for he had finally achieved his ultimate goal of safeguarding both the hero and the world. Stripped of his clothes by the intense flames, he began to shiver from the sudden cold. With an empty wallet and no attire, he contemplated the idea of selling the Majin ruler's sword. As he finally resolved to depart the interdimensional rift, he couldn't help but wonder how much time had truly passed in that realm of endless battle. Was it merely a few months, or perhaps an entire year? He finally returned to his own dimension, but to a location he didn't recognize. Spotting a sign pointing to the main road, he decided to follow it. After walking for some time, he arrived in the royal capital, but it felt profoundly different from his memories, leaving him to wonder about the many changes that had occurred. As he strolled past the guards at the gate, they were initially shocked by his unkempt appearance, then quickly stopped him. He casually asked what was amiss, and they pointed out his obvious lack of clothing. He honestly told them that he had journeyed through an interdimensional rift and lost everything, including his bag and adventurer's card. The guards began to suspect he might have encountered highwaymen and been robbed, but he was too embarrassed to admit the full, fantastical truth. Despite his attempts to explain, they remained skeptical. Luck, not wanting to prolong the situation, played along, assuring them he would be more careful in the future. They then inquired about his identification papers, but Luck confessed he had lost those too. They agreed to provide him with temporary papers. However, when they asked for his name and he simply stated, "Luck," the guards reacted with an astonished surprise. Later, they outfitted Luck in some borrowed clothes before allowing him into the city. Walking through the bustling market, he appreciated the guards' kindness and noted how the country seemed far more orderly than he remembered it. He planned to visit his party members first and then head to the guild. Luck stopped a passing woman and asked for directions to Galen's house. She pointed him toward a grand mansion, leaving Luck in awe of Galen's apparent ability to reside in such an enormous estate. Upon arriving at the grand mansion, the gatekeeper inquired about his purpose, and he promptly replied that he was in search of Galen. The gatekeeper, curious, questioned if he had an appointment, to which he answered in the negative. The gatekeeper regretfully explained that entry without an appointment was not possible. Luck attempted to convey that he should inform Galen that Luck was the visitor, but it seemed many impostors had previously attempted to pretend to be Luck. The gatekeeper mistakenly assumed he was just another impersonator and instructed him to leave, forbidding his return. Luck didn't take this personally, understanding that his rough appearance, complete with a powerful sword, might indeed raise suspicion. He resolved to return, but with a new wardrobe, and also planned to get his adventurer's card reissued first. As he headed towards the guild, something caught Luck's eye: a massive statue of a man that hadn't been there as far back as his memories could reach. Curiosity got the better of him, and he flagged down a passerby to inquire about the identity of the stone figure. Assuming Luck's rural attire meant he was unfamiliar with the city's history, the passerby proudly informed Luck that it was a statue of the hero Luck, who had bravely sacrificed his life a decade ago to save the country. To Luck's profound surprise, he discovered that the statue was, in fact, a likeness of himself. He couldn't help but exclaim that he didn't think he was that good-looking. But this off-handed remark did not sit well with the onlookers who overheard him, as they revered Luck as their hero. The man he was conversing with then cautioned him about the abundance of Luck fans in the area and suggested it might not be wise to offend them. Luck examined the statue more closely and assumed that his party members must have put it up, believing he was deceased. As he continued on to the guild, the information he heard about his supposed death 10 years ago kept echoing in his mind, making him realize there had been a profound misunderstanding. When he arrived at the Adventurers Guild headquarters, he came across a large poster celebrating the 10th anniversary of his presumed death. It finally hit him that indeed, a decade had passed. While at the guild, asking to renew his license, he was treated as if he were much younger by everyone. When he took a closer look at himself, he was astonished to find out that not only had 10 years passed in the rift, but he also appeared 10 years younger than when he had entered it. Galen finally located Luck in the guild and rushed to embrace him, tears streaming down his face, much to the amazement of everyone present who never thought they would witness their guild master in such an emotional state. Later, Galen took Luck to his office and offered him some delectable snacks, which Luck eagerly devoured. Curious, Luck asked Galen how he knew he was at the guild, and Galen confessed that he had received word that someone named Luck was looking for him, so he anticipated that his friend would eventually come to the guild if it was indeed the true Luck. As Luck continued to enjoy his snacks, Galen advised him to slow down to avoid an upset stomach. Galen then ordered some rice water, and soon a hooded figure carrying a tray entered through the door. To Luck's surprise, the figure revealed himself as Eric, and Luck noticed that even the ever-dashing hero had aged. Eric became emotional, expressing profound gratitude to Luck for returning, as they had long believed he was no longer alive. Following their meal, the reunited group reminisced about cherished memories. However, Eric and Galen broke into tears once again, and Luck playfully teased them for their emotional outbursts. Eric joked that it was due to the effects of aging. Luck's two friends finally realized that Luck hadn't aged at all. In fact, he seemed to have grown younger. Luck speculated that absorbing a significant amount of the Majin ruler's life force before defeating him might be the reason for his reversed aging. Eric and Galen were incredibly surprised by this news, finding it hard to believe that Luck had single-handedly defeated the Majin ruler. They expressed that Luck's achievement, defeating not just the Majin army but the ruler as well, was as mighty as the entire country's military power. Although Luck thought they might be exaggerating, Eric insisted they weren't, explaining that the country had been preparing for years for the Majin ruler's return, but now Luck had already defeated him. Galen went on to address Eric as a king and suggested rewarding Luck, which astonished Luck, since he knew Eric didn't come from a royal lineage. However, Eric clarified that his service in repelling the Magian army led to his recognition as a king. Galen explained that Eric was now the king of the country, while Galen himself had become the guild's grandmaster. Luck initially appeared happy about their success, but they surprised him by granting him the title of Archduke Luck Franzen. Luck was bewildered because he never thought of himself as a noble and had no last name. Eric explained that it was a reward for his sacrifice, and Galen added that the other nobles supported the decision, making it easy. Luck confided in his friends that he wanted to keep his survival a secret from the public to avoid power struggles with other nobles. However, Eric revealed that he had already discussed and agreed on the matter with the other nobles, leaving Luck no choice. Luck approached Galen with a unique request to reapply as a new adventurer, wiping away his history as an S rank. He believed it was a golden opportunity for a fresh start. Despite their initial hesitation, Eric eventually grasped Luck's reasons and asked Galen to craft a new identity for him, to which Galen obliged. The new card showed his name as Luck, with only his middle name being displayed, and his true name became Luck Franzen, with his S rank status carefully concealed. Galen offered him a room to rest, and Luck spent a week at Galen's house, catching up on sleep and regaining his strength. Luck finally awoke after a deep sleep, and to his surprise, the butler informed him that he had been asleep for a whole week. The butler then mentioned that Galen was waiting in the dining hall. Luck headed there to greet Galen, who was relieved that Luck was finally awake and must have been worried. Luck reassured Galen not to be concerned and began to dig into the delicious breakfast Galen was having. However, Galen served him specially made rice water, which Luck assumed was because he hadn't eaten in a week. Galen inquired about Luck's plans for the day, and Luck explained that he was going to look for work at the guild. He also asked for a new magic satchel, as he was beginning his adventure anew, and Galen kindly volunteered to prepare one for him. Once Luck finished his preparations, he headed to the Adventurers' Guild. On his way, a girl practicing sword skills overheard the gatekeeper from Galen's estate apologizing for being rude to Luck the other day. Intrigued, the lady discreetly observed them from behind a tree. Luck reassured the gatekeeper that it was not a problem, and the gatekeeper thanked him for his understanding. Luck bid him farewell. Later, Luck stood in front of his stone statue, feeling that he wouldn't easily get used to seeing it. As he continued to gaze at the statue, a young boy suddenly rushed past and tripped, falling to the ground. The boy's mother scolded him for running, and when the boy started to cry, she consoled him, saying that crybabies can't become impressive individuals like Luck. The boy promised never to cry again. Upon hearing this, Luck winced, believing that it was better if people didn't use others as an excuse to educate children. When he arrived at the Adventurers Guild headquarters, he observed the absence of requests to deal with dragons or Magian, leading him to conclude that the country must be enjoying peaceful times. He proceeded to sift through the beginner quests, searching for a challenging one with a modest reward, and eventually found such a task. Luck submitted the job request to the guild administrator for approval. However, she questioned his ability to handle the job solo. Luck asserted his competence, but she insisted that it was perilous for a newcomer to face goblins alone. He tried to persuade her that he could manage it, but she remained resolute in not allowing him to go alone. Suddenly, Luck heard a voice from behind asking if he would like to join them for a journey. He turned to find a young boy and girl and inquired about their identity. They revealed that they were fellow F-rank adventurers. The boy was a sorcerer named Ariel, and the girl was a scout archer named Jeannie. They mentioned needing a frontliner for their team. Before Luck could contemplate the offer, the guild administrator swiftly approved it, leaving Luck with no choice but to agree. As they headed toward the forest, Ariel introduced himself as an 18-year-old fireball caster, while Jeannie introduced herself as a 17-year-old archer. They explained that their siblings specialized in exterminating goblins in the countryside. Considering Luck had entered the interdimensional rift at the age of 30 and fought for a decade, he was actually a 40-year-old man. However, revealing this would be awkward, so he simply told them he was a bit older than they were. They remained skeptical, though, because Locke looked younger than they did. After a while, they took a break and inquired about Locke's choice to accept goblin subjugation requests despite the complexity and modest rewards. Locke didn't reply directly, but instead asked why they took on the task themselves. They explained that their impoverished village suffered from goblin attacks and couldn't afford to hire help, so they assumed the responsibility of dealing with goblins. Later, they realized that other places in the world also faced goblin threats, leading them to become adventurers. Jeannie assumed that Locke must have a similar reason, and Locke decided to confess to avoid further questions. He found the two adventurers kind, and believed it was his duty as their elder to guide young adventurers like them. Jeannie questioned fellow travelers for details regarding the goblin attacks. After gathering information, she concluded that the goblin den likely resided in a specific mountain, estimating their numbers to be approximately 14. They opted to follow the goblins' tracks. Locke acknowledged Jeannie's exceptional scouting abilities, which seemed beyond what was expected from an F rank. However, he was aware that she had underestimated the goblin count due to missing the camouflaged footprints. This suggested that another, more intelligent creature was guiding the goblins. Although Locke contemplated sharing his deductions, he decided not to, preferring they figure it out for themselves. They traced the goblins to a mountain tunnel guarded by numerous monsters. Locke observed that the tunnel was both deep and lengthy, and because of its haphazard layout, it was vulnerable to flanking. Locke informed the siblings of his plan to take the lead, with Jeannie providing backup using her bow, while Ariel preserved his magic. He swiftly eliminated one of the goblin leaders, aware he could take out two at once with a single sword strike, but he opted to let the others handle the remaining foes. As they progressed through the tunnel, they continued to deal with more goblins. After a while, they managed to defeat most of them and decided it was time to take a break. Ariel and Jeannie appeared quite worn out after battling approximately 30 goblins. Locke then inquired if Ariel could still conjure a fireball, to which Ariel replied that he could, but he was running low on stamina. Jeannie also mentioned that she was nearly out of arrows. Ariel suggested they retreat for now and return when they had recovered. Locke agreed, acknowledging that continuing his adventures with depleted mana and arrows would be unwise. However, just as they were about to depart, they heard a loud roar and the heavy footsteps of an approaching monster. The monster was revealed to be a goblin lord, and Ariel recalled that F rankers couldn't handle such an opponent. Even C rankers would struggle. Locke was confident that he could defeat the goblin lord, but he suspected there was an even more powerful monster in charge, as the goblin lord didn't seem like one to lead other goblins. Suddenly, a beast girl appeared and attacked the goblin lord, urging Locke's party to escape. Locke, however, decided to stay behind, instructing only Ariel and Jeannie to run while the girl battled the goblin lord. Locke, who had been observing, offered his assistance. She was surprised to see him and questioned why he hadn't fled yet. Locke explained that there was no need to run, which frustrated her, and she urged him to stay out of her way. With her struggling against the monster, Locke warned her that at her current pace, she was likely to lose. She took offense and questioned if he was implying that she was weaker than the goblin lord. Locke clarified that wasn't what he meant, but before he could finish, her sword suddenly shattered, and he continued explaining that her sword wasn't strong enough. The goblin made another attack at her, but she narrowly evaded it. Locke once more offered his assistance, but her refusal came with anger. Again, she attempted to defend herself with a dagger, but the goblin lord knocked it away. Just as the goblin lord was about to deliver a finishing blow with his spiked club, Locke took action without further inquiry and swiftly dispatched the goblin with a single, decisive strike. Locke stepped in with his sword and saved the girl. He asked her if she had been hurt, and she retorted with a demand to know who he was. She was stunned and accused him of being a liar when he introduced himself as an F-rank adventurer that was just passing by. He showed her his card so she could see for herself. Her next wonder was why he was so proud to be an F-rank adventurer in the first place. She then introduced herself as Shia, the daughter of Danton, the chief of the Eastern Furry tribe, a B-rank adventurer. She thanked Locke for saving her and prostrated to show her gratitude, which made Locke shy. She also apologized for her impolite attitude earlier. If only she had known that he was that skilled, she wouldn't have told him to run away at first. Now she felt embarrassed. He told her she made the right call by asking what she felt was a new adventurer to take cover. He then reintroduced himself as Locke, a veteran F-rank adventurer, whatever that meant. They started to hear a noise from a deep well that startled Shia. Locke believed an enemy far stronger than the Goblin Lord was within the well. Whatever was within the well was aware of their presence, and could only imagine that these two adventurers had come to sacrifice themselves, because why else would they be here? Locke recalled earlier Shia referred to the Goblin Lord as Small Fry. This must mean there was something more powerful around. Locke explained further, whatever it was would be at the deepest part of the well. He decided if there truly was a greater force than the Goblin Lord, then he had a duty to defeat it and protect the village. Shia marveled at his will, but advised that the enemy was not someone that could be defeated by sheer willpower. The enemy was the Vampire Lord. Shia told him the backstory of how her tribe had been working as vampire hunters for generations. Unfortunately, a few days ago, in a battle with the vampires, there was a particular vampire whom her father had inflicted a serious injury on, but failed to kill. That particular vampire was the Vampire Lord, and the vampire hunters had been able to track the Vampire Lord's hideout. Locke expressed his doubt that she would be able to take on the Vampire Lord, since she was having such trouble with the Goblin Lord. Shia stubbornly stated that she had a duty as the daughter of the tribe chief to clear away her tribe's dishonor. Locke asked if that honor prevented the idea of working together to defeat the Vampire Lord. Shia replied with a negative. Locke then offered her a sword, as she didn't have one anymore. The sword he offered her was his, which left him without a weapon. He then clarified that he was strong even with his bare hands. She interpreted Locke's gesture as an indirect way of saying she should defeat the Vampire Lord herself in truth. That's what she was hoping for. They descended the steps and were faced by many goblins, which Locke single-handedly defeated. This led Shia to conclude that Locke was very powerful. They continued down the rabbit hole until they were in the same space with the Vampire Lord. Shia expressed how she planned to defeat him with her own hands. The Vampire Lord recalled how her father was determined to do the same thing. Heck, an entire force was involved, but they could only inflict injuries. The Vampire Lord expressed that in comparison to her father's greatest efforts, she was very weak. The Vampire Lord continued to ridicule and insult Shia. The scene crescendoed as the Vampire Lord stated that she had actually made a mistake by bringing Locke, a human, down to his cave. Shia was from a species that couldn't be charmed, but humans could. The Vampire Lord planned to charm Locke into a slave. It was all too late. Before Locke could react, the Vampire Lord cast his spell, then commanded Locke to come towards him. Locke started walking towards him, and Shia berated herself for not knowing any better, to think that she forgot about the Bloodsucker's charm ability. Locke, no matter how strong, never stood a chance. The Vampire Lord gave Shia an ultimatum: death by him or death by a charmed Locke. Locke continued to walk toward the Vampire Lord. It looked like he was still very much under the spell, and both him and Shia were screwed. Then, the plot twist. Locke punched the Vampire Lord square in the face. The Vampire Lord's charm didn't work because Locke's mental resistance was exceptionally high. The vampire remained in disbelief. It was Locke's turn to ridicule the Vampire Lord, calling him a lesser vampire under the impression of lordship. The vampire tried to retaliate, but Locke remained quick on his feet. Shia, who was now on the sidelines, noticed a magic circle. There was Ariel's super speed and sorcery at its best. Locke called it sorcery vastly different from the pathetic charm of the Vampire Lord, referring to his draining touch. As the vampire's life was drained away, he demanded to know who exactly Locke really was. Locke introduced himself the same as he had done with Shia, and the vampire retorted that he was lying. The Vampire Lord then made an attempt to escape by turning into multiple bats that would fly away, but Shia didn't let him. She stabbed him with Locke's sword, and the bats started to turn to ash. The vampire lord was defeated, and she thought its power was absorbed by Locke's sword. He waved it off as only her imagination. Locke asked if she would retrieve the vampire's head, as the rest of him had disintegrated. Shia instead retrieved the vampire's medallion. Inwardly, Locke analyzed that such medallions didn't exist a decade ago. A cursed medallion, an item that special vampire lords bury within their bodies as they suck people's blood and take their lives. Curses are amassed within the medallion. The head of the vampire lord spoke, saying peace wouldn't reign because he had been defeated. The medallion had the power to open the door to the interdimensional rift, and as long as the door was open, countless magin would overrun the world. Gods would also descend from the opposite dimension, gods of the dark beings. The head also said they would continue to live in extreme fear until the worst happened. It was only a matter of time before vampires from around would come after them for the medallion because it was like a magnet. Locke used the sword to strike the medallion, breaking it in two. The sword then began to suck in all the dark energy, which the head identified as the curses. When every last one of the curses was sucked up, Locke asked if any magin would still come through even if the dimension door was opened. The head then realized Locke was holding the great magin sword, which meant he was the great sorcerer. Oops, guess Shia now knew his secret, which he asked to be kept. Shia and Locke returned to the Adventurers Guild, carrying a few too many magic stones from their goblin extermination adventure. Jeannie explained it was a much larger horde than they initially expected, but they had the help of Shia, a B-rank adventurer. After Shia and Locke initially defeated the vampire lord, they reunited with Ariel and Jeannie. They were truthful to the siblings about running into the vampire lord, depicting Shia as the true hero who defeated him. They, however, kept Locke's true identity hidden, simply depicting him as an extraordinary adventurer who had circumstances. They decided the information about the vampire lord was sensitive data that upper management needed to handle instead of the guild, and Shia was put in charge of informing the said management as a B-rank adventurer. Shia met up with the rest after reporting to the management. She told them the guild would be involved in the action against the vampire lord, and she had given them half of the medallion. Was that really a good idea, Shia? Shia reminded them that she still had the other half she could use as proof of clearing her tribe's dishonor. It also served as evidence they would need when the time came for them to explain things. Locke decided to let things be, and in the meantime, it was a drink and toast of celebration. After drinks, the siblings approached Locke's statue and knelt before it. They encouraged Locke to do the same. They believed it was luck who had provided divine protection that saw them through the mission, and to that, they had come back to show gratitude. Shia also acknowledged luck must have had a hand in their success, and Locke just stayed on the sidelines watching the madness. The siblings soon bid their farewells to Shia and Locke, hoping to meet them again at the guild. This left Shia and Locke to assure that truly luck was on their side, just in different ways. Locke asked if Shia could get her tribe to share in detail the intelligence they had gathered from the vampires with him. If the vampires' goal was to force open the interdimensional door to summon dark gods, the beastfolk tribe should consider that the vampires weren't a problem for just them. Locke didn't plan to let the peace that had been upheld for 10 years be destroyed. Shia was momentarily zoned out, still not over the striking resemblance she now saw between Locke's statue and Luck himself. Locke continued to counter any such resemblance. Shia then basically expressed how lucky she was to be working with someone so legendary, and promised she would return quickly to her village and come back with the information Locke needed. She left, and Locke decided that he would need to report back to Galan. The Adventurers Guild was a large organization. The larger the organization, the more time it took for a decision to be made. If Locke didn't do it first, it would take time for the news about the vampire lord to organically reach Galan. The appearance of the vampire lord wasn't important, but the vampire's goals were the real threat. If they responded too late, they were bound to regret it. Chances were, Shia felt uneasy with the guild's response, hence why she entrusted the medallion to Locke. Locke returned to Galen's place, and it turned out Galen had been worried sick because it had been days' talk about a typical father that Locke didn't remember asking for. Locke presented the other half of the medallion, and Galen wanted it examined with a special machine. He also stated that he would be in contact with Shia. Cerise, Galen's daughter, stepped into the room and gave a cold shoulder. Locke initially thought it was directed at him, but Galen explained that he might be an overprotective father. Cerise wanted to be an adventurer, and Galen wasn't having it. He would ultimately discuss this with his wife, who was on a business trip in a neighboring country. Locke watched Cerise train from the window. She had a form similar to Galen and certainly had talent. She caught him staring, and he had to turn away. Later on, while Locke was having lunch, Cerise stepped into the room and immediately gave him a cold shoulder upon seeing him. She pointed a finger straight at him and questioned if he was her father's bastard child. At least it explained what her issue was with him. She broke down her suspicion to her father, waiting for their mother to be out on a trip before receiving his bastard child. He was rather pleased to meet. There was also the fact that her father was worried sick when Locke was missing for days. All analysis pointed to her conclusion, which made her begin to tear up. Locke was challenged with telling the truth, as letting Cerise's assumptions run wild could lead to a disaster, causing a crack in the Galen family. He spoke up, but she wasn't about to believe Locke was actually her father's comrade who was a 40-year-old in a kid's form. She continued to insist they must be siblings, even when Locke pulled out his Adventurer's Guild card. They might not bear the same last name, but this could easily be because her father never claimed Locke. She decided she was Locke's big sister and started to warm up to him. She knew her mother would be cross, though, and Locke feared the same. This was the sort of narrative that could absolutely tear the Galen family apart. Locke took his chances and revealed his true identity to Cerise. He explained that he had returned 10 days ago from the interdimensional rift. His explanation, however, led her to believe that the great sorcerer was her father's son and her little brother, as Locke did have a resemblance to Galen. To think her imagination couldn't get any wilder. Locke started to see why Galen was against Cerise becoming an adventurer. Although a strong imagination also implied a strong will. Locke then presented Cerise with a proposal. He asked her to do a simple guild quest with him, as she had already registered as an F-rank adventurer against Galen's wishes. While on their quest, Locke asked why she had chosen to become an adventurer. She revealed she was told adventure stories from her father instead of being sung lullabies, fascinating stories, more so than a picture book. She wanted to go on adventures like her father did. Her dream was to be just as strong. This caused Locke to reveal that many adventurers had died trying to reach Galen's level of power. Extraordinary talent and devotion, and the godly fortune bestowed upon the trio of them, was what saw them through their adventures. Locke continued to advise Cerise to take it one step at a time, no shortcuts, but to pick quests best suited for her and gradually improve with those. It was the best strategy if she really wanted to become just like her father. Locke knew that there were flaws to his advice. Adventurers took up suitable quests all the time and still ended up killed because the guild miscalculated, like in the goblin situation. Ariel and Jeannie would be dead meat if Locke and Shia hadn't shown up when they did. Locke then took it upon himself to show Cerise techniques and skills in order to prevent herself from losing her life, even in the face of miscalculations. They took a closer look at their quest. Villagers reported sightings of rabid beasts, but there had been no human casualties yet. If the sightings were true, then their current quest was unsuitable for F-rankers. It was a puzzling situation. A group of magic beasts that didn't exist had been spotted, but didn't seem to have harmed any humans. This could only mean one thing: illusion magic. They went over to where the sightings were reported and confirmed it truly was illusion magic. Locke advised Cerise not to feel overwhelmed by the weight of it and just go for it. Cerise went in with her sword, able to strike at the same time the dragon reached out a claw. She hit it square on the claw, and Locke watched from the sideline with an intrigued smile. Her strength as a fighter was certainly incredible. Even without bias for her relation to Galen, her strength was proportionate to a B-rank adventurer, someone like Shia. There was cause for fright, though. The illusion of the dragon was quite strong. Illusion magic, it's a mass of magical powers. The more Cerise was able to make contact with it with her sword, the more of an interaction, and the more of an interaction, the more likely for even the illusion dragon to possess a mind of its own. The dragon started to release a fireball. Locke deemed it was the perfect time to first float and then accelerate. His aim was to execute a learning start skill. He made contact with the dragon's forehead with his hand and started to learn the illusion magic. His learning was soon complete, and he was able to dispel the illusion. Cerise was still under the illusion that she was hit by the fireball, but Locke was able to talk her out of it. Even she realized she didn't have any burns. Locke tipped her that she was bound to fail using the tactic of attacking illusion magic like it was the real deal. If one couldn't identify the true source of the sorcerer's magic, it was best to retreat, as illusions could make one hurt themselves if they believed they were under real danger. Sometimes retreating was better than dying. But there was a greater issue. There was a greater sorcerer capable of grand illusions, and Locke wanted him to step out of his hiding place. Locke spoke out, knowing the sorcerer was somewhere close, listening. He addressed the fact that the sorcerer had not harmed any villagers, but would still need to be investigated as he had taken a spot on the Adventurers Guild's quest list. The culprit responded from within the woods that he had something to protect. Locke noted how the voice sounded like it belonged to a child. Locke asked if the thing that needed protecting couldn't be moved, and the culprit responded that it would be difficult to move at this rate without a proper negotiation. Cerise and Locke would have to report back to the guild with a failed quest. This triggered Cerise, as she didn't know how she would face her father knowing that she failed on her first quest. Locke continued to talk things out with the hidden sorcerer, explaining that even if they couldn't do anything about them, someone else would be sent out to succeed where he and Cerise had failed. This someone else may very well use brute force to expose the culprit's secret and even subjugate them. Locke was just trying to avoid all of that drama for the young sorcerer's sake. The young sorcerer revealed himself as indeed a demon child named Lucilla. Locke complimented the child's abilities, and Cerise questioned if demons weren't wicked and dangerous creatures. Locke schooled her that it was mostly a misconception with rumors that had run wild for centuries. Locke asked Lucilla about what she was protecting, and she agreed to show them. Lucilla also explained that she was trusting them because she sensed that Locke was a greater sorcerer than she was. He also didn't forcefully try to expose her. She led them to ancient ruins and pointed out Gerberga upon their return. Gerberga was a chicken. The minute Locke and Shia mentioned the obvious, Lucilla got angry. Lucilla clarified, Gerberga was a divine being with the power of a god. It was said that Gerberga's ancestors used its crowing to awaken the world, and it was the god his tribe worshipped. The backstory was that his tribe lived in the mountain range far up north. That is, until one day a vampire party suddenly came attacking the village, and Lucilla was the only survivor. The tribe entrusted the divine being to Lucilla, and she had kept them afloat with illusion magic against the vampires' relentless pursuit. Lucilla and Gerberga sought refuge at the ancient ruins, as there was a barrier set up to repel the vampire family. Locke was, however, able to ascertain the barrier wasn't doing anything. He notified Lucilla about the defeat of the vampire lord and the vampires under him. This still left other vampires that could come after Gerberga. Lucilla then pointed out that the chicken had the power to discern the world and its boundaries. It had the ability to intercept any travel with other dimensions, too. The vampires planned to force open the door to the interdimension with the cursed medallion, but their plan could be ruined by the voice of just a single chicken. Locke asked that they return to the royal capital with Gerberga and had to reveal his true identity to Lucilla, stating the sword in his hand was the Magian sword, which once belonged to the Magian ruler that was defeated by Locke himself. This made Lucilla trust him enough to protect Gerberga. As they started to leave the ruins, 3 vampires attacked them, but thankfully for Locke, the vampires realized Locke's great strength and demanded his identity. But he replied he wasn't obligated to reveal such to lesser vampires. This aggravated them, and they started to strengthen, which was the strategy that Locke was carrying out. This also confirmed that indeed Lucilla had been protecting the divine cock. Locke executed a magical arrows skill that grounded them. Next, he engulfed them in flames, but one managed to escape. The escapee started to transform into smaller bats to get away, but just then, Jurburga crowed, and it was game over. The vampires turned to ash. Apparently, metamorphosis was not allowed to exist in the eyes of the Cock's power. That was why it forcefully drew a boundary. The power was, however, limited to when vampires transformed, but it didn't mean Jurburga was any less awesome. They returned to the capital, where Shia was waiting for Locke with news meant only for his ears. He stepped away from his new companions to hear her out. There was a little hold-up on giving Locke information as she introduced herself to Locke's new adventure companions. When Locke informed them that Shia had helped him to subjugate vampires a while back, Cerise and the demon Lucilla stared at Shia in awe and respect, especially Lucilla, as it would mean that it was thanks to Shia that she was able to protect the divine Jurburga-sama from most of the vampire forces. Shia was the reason that the vampire forces pursuing and attacking them had reduced. Cerise, on the other hand, was a bit proud and jealous, so she introduced herself as Locke's apprentice, even though Locke and herself never agreed on any such thing. A competitive and tense atmosphere between Cerise and Shia ensued, and Locke sensed it, so he asked Shia to speak with him in his room, and when Cerise made her way to follow them, he stopped her from entering the room. Before they got into any real talk, Locke asked how Shia could get to the royal capital so fast, and she explained that the Beastfolk village was close to the royal capital. Now, back to business. Shia informed Locke that she needed his help to do something, and before saying what she wanted, Locke agreed to help. Shia explained that the vampire lords were planning something huge, and the one at the head of this scheme was a vampire high lord. The vampire high lord, a ruler amongst rulers, governed the vampire lords, a monster who wielded power to match even the Magin. Even for Locke, facing a vampire high lord was quite the feat and would require a lot. According to Shia, her tribe, the Lycan tribe, was combining all its efforts to identify and put a stop to the vampires' scheming, but it would be troublesome to make a move on the vampire high lord, a key member of their vanguard. Her father had not fully recovered. This was where Shia needed Locke's help, as brute force against the vampire high lord was the only way the Beastfolk could see the plans of the vampires to an end. Still, to put an end to the scheme, there was something Shia and the Lycan tribe needed to find first. The vampires were frantically looking for a chicken, and the Lycan tribe wanted to find it before the vampires did. Shia apologized for sounding nuts or wasting Locke's time, as she also didn't believe that they could be looking for just a chicken. Though she tried to convince Locke to take it seriously, as the chicken could close or create the dimensional space by the sound of its voice. Meanwhile, Locke knew that what she was saying was true and was referring to Jurburga-sama, whom he had met coincidentally on the quest with Cerise. After Shia's ranting, Locke was able to inform her that he knew about the chicken, and as he opened the door, an eavesdropping Cerise entered the room face first, with Lucilla and the revered chicken standing behind her. Cerise apologized for eavesdropping, and the divine Jurburga-sama was introduced to Shia as the chicken the tribe and the vampires were looking for. Shia was shocked that he had already found the chicken, but Locke explained that meeting Lucilla and Jurburga-sama was just a coincidence on the quest with Cerise. Since they had now gotten a hold on the divine being, the next phase of the plan was the subjugation of the vampire High Lord. Locke asked if Shia had determined the location of the High Lord, and she informed him that the tribe only knew an approximate location. Just in time, Galen walked into the estate and met the crew in the house. Galen was thrilled to see Locke home safe and sound. Galen also appreciated Locke for keeping his eyes on Cerise on her first adventure quest. Suddenly, Cerise walked into the room crying and apologizing for giving Galen the cold treatment. Galen asked if it was because he held her back from joining the Adventurers Guild. Cerise explained that it was because she assumed that Locke was the illegitimate son of her father. Galen assured her that there was no way he would have an illicit son, to which she quickly agreed, and Cerise apologized again for jumping to conclusions. When Galen asked if she gave Locke a hard time because of the misunderstanding, she escaped the question by leaving to go get the others. Galen apologized for any trouble that Cerise had put him through because of the misunderstanding. He then proceeded to overreact like an overprotective father would, saying, "At the rate she's going, she might be deceived by some evil man." Locke calmed Galen down to assure him that he would look after Cerise. Galen was so glad and hugged Locke, thanking him. At this point, Cerise walked into the room and read a wrong interpretation of their positions, thinking they were secret lovers. She ran away, asking them to take their time, while the two pursued her, trying to clear up the new misunderstanding. After a while, they explained their circumstance and got back to the elephant in the room. Galen, from all that he had heard, realized that it was not at a level of a mere nuisance. While thinking of what to do next, Shia added a new piece of vital information. If a High Lord sucked on the blood of the divine, a curse would build up and an interdimensional gate would open. Lucilla explained further that curses came from the desecration of life, and the more holy the being was, the more the curses killing gods was at the top of the hierarchy of building curses. Since they couldn't bring Jurburga-sama with them, Galen came up with the brilliant idea to have it secured in the royal palace and guarded by the royal family. They went to meet the king and friend Eric, who welcomed them warmly and introduced them to his two daughters, huge fans of the stories of Locke's adventures, and they got to meet Locke himself, the sorcerer and now Archduke. Here, Locke got to see how much of a reputation he had in the kingdom, as every child grew up with his adventure tales and aspired to be like him. After all introductions had been made, Galen asked his daughter to go play with the king's daughters and watch over Jurburga-sama while the grown-ups talked about the plan against the vampires. The seemingly close trio of daughters were led into a different room by a rather suspicious-looking maidservant. Eric apologized for bringing his children to their important discussion, and they got right into it. Eric agreed to take the divine into his protection and asked Locke what he planned to do. Locke thought for a split second and told them he would charge at the High Lord with Shia and the Lycan tribe. It wasn't a concrete strategy, so Locke explained that he would draw the masses away from the High Lord, creating an opportunity for the beast folk to launch an attack. Galen felt the strategy would stand a chance of working if the roles were reversed due to the fact that it was only Locke who could finish off the High Lord. They agreed that he would launch the attack. Galen realized that this would mean a lot of casualties for the beast folk, as he could not contribute reinforcements from the guild. The vampires could control humans, so it would be counterproductive to have human adventurers join the fight. Galen asked if Shia was sure about going through with the plan. Shia re-established her determination by saying that it was better than letting a High Lord get away. While all this was happening, the suspicious-looking maidservant had locked and tied the knobs of the door to the room with the princesses, Cerise, and Jurburga. The princesses tried to open the door, and Cerise suspected something was off. She asked them to get behind her, and almost immediately, 3 Lich Kings appeared. Lich Kings were wizards or priests who were high-ranking when they were alive and ended up becoming undead out of the desire for everlasting life. They were the kings of immortality, highly intelligent, and capable of using magic. Even though there was little Cerise could do to protect the princesses and fend off the Lich Kings, she stood her ground, determined to protect the princesses to the very end. The 3 Lich Kings attacked ferociously with fireballs and hundreds of arrows, doing damage to the room and alerting the guards. Locke entered just in time to protect Cerise and the princesses, praising her for living up to the title, his apprentice. Locke assured them that he would handle the Lich Kings from there on, skillfully and in one shot. He trapped the 3 Lich Kings in a sphere that would ultimately turn into an extremely high-pressure, high-temperature, and high-density hell, which would lead the Lich Kings burning to dust. This left Cerise in utmost awe, as in the blink of an eye, 3 Lich Kings were obliterated by just one spell: implosion. She saw the true power of the legendary sage Luck Franzen. Luckily, Locke spotted the ringleaders of the attack on the palace, lesser vampires who wondered what had happened to the Lich Kings. Locke saw this as a beautiful opportunity, and using Lucilla's illusion spell that he had learned, he changed into the higher vampire they recognized as the 8th. He used this to interrogate them, and they informed him that they were subordinates and under the order of the 6th. The lower the number, the higher the power the vampire possessed. Therefore, there was someone higher than the form he took. The eighth Locke asked them why they entered the palace and what their mission was. The lesser vampires informed him that their mission was to capture the chicken god. Shocked by this, he decided to be cunning and acted like the eighth was ordered to capture the chicken god as well by the High Lord. The lesser vampires bought the act and apologized, thinking there had been a misunderstanding. They even gave him a teleportation magic circle that could get him to the sixth, so the confusion could be resolved. Successful at getting all he needed, with Galen's help, he took the lesser vampires out and returned the daughters to their fathers safely. They discovered how the lesser vampires got into the castle, even when it was guarded with magic. It was through an already finished teleportation magic circle, which was a tray that the suspicious maid Rana had brought there with treats inside of it. Cerise and Shia made their way to seize the maid, while Locke requested that Galen guard the chicken god. Locke went through the teleportation circle with the goal of finding the so-called sixth and killing him. He landed in a different environment through the tray and soon enough encountered another vampire asking who Locke was. Still using the illusion magic, he intimidated the vampire he encountered. When he turned, the vampire recognized him as the eighth and asked if he had heard that the eighth was annihilated by the beast folk. Locke pushed further with the intimidation, asking if the lesser vampire had a death wish. When the lesser vampire asked why the eighth had teleported there, Locke lied, saying he had a message for the sixth from the vampire High Lord. The lesser vampire led the way for him with glee. Upon asking, Locke got to know that the location was a fortress that the sixth had ordered the villagers to build. The lesser vampire continued, saying how good of a labor force the humans made, and the ones that could not build made good food. With this, Locke could not control his resentment and in one strike put an end to the vampire. With that same rage, he made his way to the sixth, slaughtering every vampire, greater or lesser, that got in his way. The sixth killed the rest in an engulfing shot and faced Locke, surprising and betraying his subordinates. The sixth and Locke exchanged swords, and Locke landed a few damaging strikes on the sixth thanks to the sword. The sixth noticed the sword and tried to get it from him, but Locke severed the sixth's arm and regained his swords from the falling forearms in a cool fashion. This left the sixth in awe and wondering who Locke was. Locke introduced himself, and the sixth realized that their attack did not go successfully, given the speed of Locke's counterattack. Curious, Locke asked him how he got his underlings into the royal palace, but when the sixth showed no sign of disclosing information, Locke killed him off. Before the sixth died, he warned Locke to enjoy the life he had now. For when the time comes, the High Lord will bring chaos and pain into their healthy and peaceful lives. As the vampire died, the medallion broke in halves, letting out the curses and wailings of numerous beings that the sixth had killed. The sword absorbed all those wailings, which made Locke more determined to put an end to the plotting of the vampire High Lord. Soon enough, Locke was ambushed by a horde of vampires, through which he angrily cut to get to the exit of the fort. Then Locke realized something sad. The humans who had been subordinated from getting their blood sucked could not be saved, as they simply turned to ash once they lost their governing lord. He realized that there was not a single living soul in the entire town that could be saved. On getting back to the royal palace, which right now had her defenses at peak level, he was welcomed by the king and the guild master, Eric and Galen, at the palace gate. Locke sadly assured them that he had dealt with every vampire he could find there, showing proof, but he added that, unfortunately, there were no nearby living villagers to save. Locke blamed himself for failing to see the plan earlier, but Galen took the blame as he was the guild master and Locke had just been back to the world for 10 days. Galen accepted responsibility and assured that the nearby villagers would have a proper burial, as it was the very least that could be done for the dead. As for the maid Rana, she was just charmed, which implied that it was still possible to heal her out of the control. Hearing this made Locke and Cerise relieved. Thanks to defeating the sixth, about 5 people turned to ashes and another 30 lost consciousness. Since their chances for castle labor to become vampire subordinates, the palace wasn't a safe place to protect Jurburga-sama. This made Locke determined to end the High Lord. With Jurburga-sama seeing that this was the safest option they had, the two decided to accompany Locke, and the trio made plans to end the High Lord. The adventurer trio was back on a quest, but this time as the king, guild master, and legendary great sage. Cerise asked to join the trio on the adventure, but the overprotective father that she had almost immediately said no. She tried to convince her father that she had gathered enough experience to defeat the lesser vampires, at least. Galen refused her request and added that if she came along, she would only be a burden. After her father said this, the disappointed Cerise accepted the decision and did not push anymore. As a way to lighten the atmosphere and save the beautiful father and daughter relationship Galen had with his, Locke suggested that Galen give one of his long swords to his daughter, since her fighting style was just like his, and she had an abnormal strength like her father as well. He then added that she should use the swords to ensure that the princesses were safe while their father was on the quest. Locke then added that there might be vampire underlings in the palace. He expected his apprentice to protect the princesses in the castle without mistake. This satisfied Galen, as his daughter would at least be in the safety of the castle, and at the same time, Locke managed to pacify Cerise as well, since she was eager to prove herself. In reality, she might have been sweet-talked into staying in the palace and defending the princesses by Locke. The truth is, the possible occurrence that Locke made up would happen, and better still, was happening. A horde of flying vampires attacked the palace in a bid to take Jurburga-sama, and now Cerise was left to fend them off. Luckily, the vampires underestimated what an F-rank adventurer like Cerise could do. But when the time for action arrived, Cerise delivered as she tore through them with the similar strength that her father had. The vampires tried to use magic to fight her, but she remembered Locke's advice on how to beat a magician. You make your blade touch him first. She easily took the two vampires who were using magic out before they could do anything. The vampires that were not exchanging blows with Cerise tried to take the chicken from Lucilla, only to realize to their greatest surprise that there was nothing inside of the cage. The cage was an illusion which Lucilla made to appear as a huge, fiery phoenix. Thanks to Lucilla's illusion, the enemies could not flee, and this would give Cerise the opportunity of finishing all of the vampires off. Meanwhile, the adventuring trio were on their way to the High Lord's hideout, which was just a day away from the royal capital, showing that the High Lord had belittled their ability to make any change or effect to his plans. Though it was going to take a lot to find the High Lord's location on the mountain belt they were now at. Out of the blue, a beastman appeared to inform them that by decree of the Beast Queen, the location had been uncovered. He further added that the numbers of the vampires were plenty, and the strength of the beast folk would not be enough to launch an effective attack. Nonetheless, they could lure most of the vampires, even putting the pride and name of the Lycan tribe on the line. They readied their valor and entered for battle. Locke handed the sword he collected from the Sixth to Shia, since it was an awesome sword that held its own against the Majin ruler that Locke had right now. Everyone else had special swords. Locke had the Majin ruler sword, Galen had a magical sword of fire. If she were to face the High Lord with the sword she had, it would be unreliable. He saw Shia's enthusiasm and gave her the sword. Locke also checked if the curses on the sword were a danger with his appraisal skill. When they got to the hideout, they met a scanty entrance, which meant that the beast folk had successfully lured the majority of the vampires away. The crew still found it hard to locate the hideout's entrance. A concealment magic had already been cast on the entrance to hide it from them. Shia undid the magic, revealing the entrance to the hideout. The crew got inside the hideout and found a few vampires waiting. Locke had an ability to put lesser vampires to sleep, his sleep cloud magic. Hearing that just the higher-ups in the vampire family could resist such a skill, it was just the nobles and the archers that withstood the magic. Galen charged at the vampires with no intent of holding back. He cut them up in one fell swoop. Cowardly vampires hid in the walls of the hideout, waiting to ambush him with a rain of magic arrows, since they had seen their enemy's ability as a warrior. Little did they know that Galen, the warrior, was a man of brute force, as he cut them in half, not excluding the walls where they were hiding. As usual, the other two just watched him do his thing, charging with heavy attacks while Shia watched in on the cutting-edge captain of the legendary hero adventure party. Since they drew close to the evil that lurked within, they got more alert and proceeded to conquer. They got into a weirdly walled part of the cave where they met a luscious female vampire standing in their path to the High Lord. She sarcastically yet politely asked them to leave the cave and die while they were at it, underestimating their power to fight her. They retorted, telling her a mere lord could not stop them. She showed them an already split cursed medallion that she had been permitted by the High Lord to use. Next, she made her pet monster's presence known. Apparently, they had entered its nest, and she had no plans of letting them leave or remain alive. The ancient dragon zombie attacked the trio, and they all got a bad feeling about this encounter. The dragon zombie sent a gust of poison breath at them, and they tried to defend themselves against the heavy attacks. Since this was a tough encounter, they told Locke to go on ahead without them, just like he did those 10 years ago. They had waited for the opportunity to repay their debts to him and say those words, "Leave this to us and head on first, Locke." Locke heeded their request and charged towards the High Lord. This distracted the female vampire from the rest, creating a chance for Gollin to strike. Unfortunately, this didn't make a difference, as the female vampire did not use the cursed medallion's power for only the zombie ancient dragon, but for herself as well, so the strike did little to no damage to the vampire. She strengthened herself, and the king and warrior were left to face off against a strengthened female vampire lord. Meanwhile, the queen was present at the cathedral. She instructed that all holy people present there should join her in strengthening the barrier around the High Lord's location, as she knew that the barrier would greatly limit the High Lord's movements and increase their chances of winning. Together, everyone present at the cathedral prayed for God's divine protection. Since they couldn't fight at the battlefront, this was their way of aiding the victory against the High Lord. At the nearby forest surrounding the High Lord's location, the battle was intensifying, and it looked like the vampire forces of the High Lord had the upper hand at the moment. Most of the vampires present in the forest were lords, so they were much more difficult to deal with than the rest. As a result, the attackers decided to retreat. However, the retreat was just a part of their brilliant strategy, as they intended to lure the vampires into a hot chase. The vampires seemed to buy the bait as they got ready to chase down the people, but one of the lords could see through their plan. He informed his comrades of the people's likely strategy to create space for a detached force to assault the High Lord. According to this lord, there was a chance that the detached force had already made its way to the High Lord's castle. He smiled and applauded the brilliant strategy of his adversaries. However, he remained unbothered, as he knew that the detached force just condemned themselves to death at the hands of the High Lord. After all, the High Lord's power was too great to be bothered by a group of weak humans. Just as predicted, Locke and Shia made their way to the High Lord's castle to face off against the High Lord himself. Everyone had done their part. Now Locke and his companion must finish off the work. They went straight to the High Lord's location and met him sitting as if to say he had been expecting them. The High Lord smiled and boasted about teaching them a lesson. They could feel his malevolence and could tell that it was much more superior to others. Locke revealed to Shia that the High Lord had an offensive barrier up. She nervously nodded to signal that she understood. Shia observed that Locke didn't appear too bothered by the High Lord. Behind the High Lord, there was a cage that made them curious. The cage was a little too far away, so they couldn't see what was inside. The High Lord took advantage of this distraction to attack Locke. Fortunately, Locke easily blocked his attack, leaving Shia in awe of both of their powers, as she could barely keep up with their moves. The High Lord commended Locke's reaction speed, saying it was impressive for a human. When he found out that charm didn't work on Locke, he was particularly intrigued and sought to know the name of his adversary. Locke refused to give out his name and said the High Lord was the one with barriers. Locke took out his blade to attack the High Lord, and while he managed to evade the blade attacks, Shia realized that he might be oblivious to her attacks, so Shia came in and attacked from the High Lord's blind side. Unfortunately for her, he easily evaded the attack and turned to face her. Locke took this opportunity to swing his blade at the High Lord's arm, effectively taking his left arm away. This increased their confidence. The High Lord ensured that their confidence was to be short-lived by growing a new arm. He said that their blade wouldn't work on him, but Locke realized that the problem was his excess supply of mana that was difficult to absorb in just one hit. He steadied himself for another attack. Meanwhile, King Eric and Gallen were still facing tough battles outside. The battle took a new turn when King Eric asked Gallen to take care of the dragon zombie. The vampire laughed at Gallen, thinking Eric had ditched his comrade, but Eric had only put his comrade in the battle that suited him better. Eric used levitation to chase after the vampire. Unknown to him, the vampire he was chasing was a decoy and just a brilliant cloning move. The real vampire held Eric from behind and buried her teeth in his neck, intending to turn King Eric into a vampire and her manservant. Unfortunately, the bite failed, and Eric remained unchanged. He revealed that he was already married and couldn't be turned by her. He also revealed that the hero's blood had high poison and mental resistance, which was perfect for getting rid of witches. She tried to attack them again with magic, but her powers didn't seem as powerful as before. The barrier created by those in the cathedral was now in effect, and the people suddenly had the upper hand against the vampires. Eric finished the vampire witch off first, but she first warned that they would never win against the High Lord. Gallen also finished his opponent off, but he faced some difficulty trying to move his weak hips around. The battle against the vampire witch was now won. King Eric teased Gallen by calling him an old man, while Gallen responded by teasing him about flirting with the vampire witch while married to Queen Levi. Meanwhile, back at the High Lord's castle, Locke and Shia were still engaged in a fierce battle against him. At this point, they noticed that his movements had slowed down, so Locke said that the time to attack the High Lord had finally come. He used a draining touch skill on the High Lord, which weakened him even further. The High Lord started to retreat, so he called out the Divine. The presence of the Divine changed the whole shape of the battle, and the previously retreating High Lord seemed eager to fight now. Locke told the High Lord that there was no point in delaying his inevitable defeat, but he became less confident when the High Lord revealed his cursed medallion. The High Lord said it was unwise to bring the Divine to a battle, and called it a sacrifice for the gods. Once he activated the cursed medallion, he used it to erect a powerful anti-barrier as a counter to the barrier erected by Queen Levi and the others at the cathedral. With the anti-barrier, the High Lord had the upper hand again, and he now intended to feast on the blood of the Divine. The anti-barrier completely restricted their movements and forced them down onto the ground. The High Lord revealed that he activated the divine protection of the gods of the dark. He grinned and explained that the strong force Locke and Shia were getting hit by was their god's divine protection. This protection stopped lords, high lords, and archers from taking any action in the royal capital, keeping the people safe. However, with the activation of the divine protection of the gods of the dark, Locke, Shia, and everyone around was restrained from moving as much as they were loved by their god. Meanwhile, back at the Grand Cathedral, Queen Levi sought to restore the supportive barrier that was now destroyed. The others advised the queen not to proceed with the barrier, as it might negatively affect the royal capital's barrier. Queen Levi didn't intend to stop trying to construct the barrier. She reminded the others of the sacrifice that King Eric and his comrades were currently making against the High Lord. The least they could do was provide God's divine protection for them. The queen's words inspired the people who were now ready to join in the formation of the barrier. The archpriest, while talking to himself, revealed that Queen Levi was the true form of Levi Ardens. Locke activated a dual barrier and then used the marionette skill as a last resort. With this skill, even though his muscles felt like they were being torn apart, he could still move his body a bit more freely than moments ago. He struggled to get up and walked towards his target, the crystal core, the source of the anti-barrier. The High Lord saw through Locke's plan and moved to stop him. Shia anticipated this move and struck the High Lord with her blade. It was enough to slow him down, but not completely stop him, and he eventually triumphed in his mini-battle against Shia. Locke was now one step away from the crystal core and moved to take it. The High Lord immediately caught the swing of his blade, stopping him from destroying the crystal. The High Lord moved to attack him, but Xia was up again at this point and moved to help Locke in his fight. The High Lord laughed at their futile attempt to stop him while they struggled to move freely in the barrier. The dark beings had amplified powers there. Locke urged the High Lord to look at his hand. The High Lord realized that his anti-barrier was getting weaker. This must be because a holy barrier was being formed somewhere. The High Lord was bewildered at their audacity to form a holy barrier in there. Locke knew that he must make good use of this opportunity, so he went in and delivered multiple blows to the High Lord with his blade. Locke noticed Queen Levi's presence and could tell that she formed the holy barrier that helped them. Before the High Lord disappeared into thin air, he promised to remember Locke and Xia's actions. Locke brought out the divine Jurberga and let it crow as a signal of their victory. Xia informed Locke that she noticed the presence of a woman in the room. Locke revealed that it was Queen Levi. Queen Levi also felt the defeat of the High Lord and announced it at the cathedral. They all rejoiced at the news. A little while later, King Eric and Galen came in to see that the High Lord was already defeated. They asked about the pressure they felt, and Locke told them everything about the High Lord's anti-barrier. From their conversation, Locke realized that the people who weren't so close to the barrier could still move. This indicated that the anti-barrier effect had a short range. Locke checked to make certain that Xia was all right. She revealed that she only sustained small scratches after Locke protected her vital body parts with magic. Locke apologized for not fully protecting her, but she insisted that she should apologize for needing protection at all. Locke pointed out that they owed their victory to the goddess's divine protection. He asked King Eric to express his gratitude to Queen Levi. Locke thought about the decade he spent in the interdimensional rift and how he got accustomed to fighting on his own. However, he admitted that having comrades who had your back was a nice feeling. Now that the battle was over, Locke and Xia turned their attention to the cage that initially got their attention. It looked like a sleeping wolf was inside the cage, but it could easily be awakened once the sleeping cloud was removed. On closer inspection, Xia revealed that the wolf in the cage was a wolf cub and a sacred beast. She revealed that the sacred wolves had existed since the mythical days and shared a common ancestor with the Lycan tribe, sharing mutual respect. Even though the sacred beast didn't have special powers, according to her, it was smart, understood the common language, and didn't attack people. Locke dispelled the sleeping cloud and opened up the cage. The wolf rushed out as if to attack Locke. Xia intervened by explaining to the wolf how Locke saved it after defeating the vampires. The wolf, after hearing this, prostrated in front of Locke. Locke saw that the wolf was immune to the vampire's charm and subordination. He concluded that the wolf must have been captured to research Xia's beastfolk tribe. Locke told the wolf that it was free to go, asking it not to attack anyone on the way out. King Eric, Locke, and the other comrades came out to meet shouts of rejoicing from the people. The High Lord and the vampires had been defeated, so it was time for everyone to join in the celebration. A little while later, Locke and his companions made their way back to the royal capital on horses. After traveling for some time, they discovered that the wolf hadn't stopped following them since. Xia suggested that the wolf felt indebted to Locke for saving its life. Locke told the wolf to do whatever it wanted with its freedom, but the sacred beast did not stop following them. Xia suggested that the wolf wanted to make use of that freedom by following Locke. When Locke asked whether it wanted to follow him, the beast excitedly howled. Locke had no objection and declared that the wolf was now a part of his family. Sometime later, they arrived at the royal capital and were welcomed by Eric's children. They told him stories about how Cerise and Lucilla protected them while he was gone. Locke noticed a lot of vampire stones on the ground, and the children revealed that they were attacked by as many as 20 vampires and defeated 15 of them. Locke noticed a peculiar stone belonging to an arch-vampire. Cerise revealed that she defeated the vampire before it used the strength and skill, so they never had any problems. King Eric commended their work in keeping the children safe. However, he was also concerned about the arch-vampire's newfound ability to break through the royal capital's barriers. he decided that new security measures must be put into place. Locke suggested that the king should assign the beast folk to protect the castle. They were immune to charm and subordination from the vampires, and they had become more united after the last battle. King Eric promised to think about the proposal. He also asked if Locke wanted anything as a reward for his last heroics in battle. At first, Locke couldn't think of anything he needed, but he eventually realized that his family was growing bigger, so Locke told King Eric that he wanted a home for his family. The markets of the royal capital were busy as usual. A little girl desperately walked through the market. She looked very hungry, and she ended up plucking some unripe fruits off a tree. Unfortunately, some men spotted and chased after her. She barely escaped them and ran into the sewers. Meanwhile, Locke was finally presented with his home, which he insisted was a little too big for him. The others insisted that his current level should be that of an archduke, so the house wasn't too big. When he complained about the cleaning stress, they advised him to take some apprentices, like the other nobles. Apprentices were like children who had no right to inherit assets. In exchange for raising them, they helped out with the housework. Locke considered the explanation and decided to take some apprentices. His first apprentice was Lucilla, who was honored to belong to Locke's family. Shia also offered to be an apprentice and help with the cleaning. Later on, Locke explored the house with his wolf garb. He complimented lots of things, but he also pointed out that there were lots of vacant houses like this close to the royal palace. The registers said that they were the property of previous barons without heirs. He wondered why the royal family assumed control of the houses. Locke also admitted that he liked the Scout Tower and wished to make it his room. Later that night, Lucilla woke Locke up from sleep and revealed that she had been hearing strange noises coming from the house. She described it as a ghost's voice, making Locke question why Eric would give him such a house. Locke walked with Lucilla to the cellar where the sound was coming from. He heard the voices and asked Lucilla to light the place up. They saw a little girl hanging from the ceiling and crying about pain. At first, they thought she was a ghost, but the constant pleas from the little girl made them realize that they were wrong. Locke pulled the girl down, and Lucilla called her a burglar, asking Locke to immediately report her to the authorities. The little girl introduced herself as Milka and thanked Locke for saving her. According to her, she stayed in the castle because she thought it was empty. She revealed that she lost her parents a long time ago, and while she was raised by her grandfather, he also passed on a bit ago. According to her, her grandfather's home was seized after his death due to debts owed. Milka said she had lived in the sewers until recently, when one of the walls collapsed. She followed the walls and found out that it led to Locke's home, which unexpectedly had a trap and captured her. Locke was fascinated by the thought of the place being connected to the sewers. He decided to check it out, wondering where else it led to. He also said that they must seal the hole that led to the sewers. Milka showed them the collapsed wall, which looked like it collapsed due to lack of maintenance. Locke decided to patch it up for now. However, he was still curious about where the underground passage led, especially as he could hear the sounds of the wind from there. Locke used the hardening and permanent skill to patch the hole up, intending to fill in the cracks by buying proper stones the next day. Milka asked Locke to let her stay in the sewers as she had nowhere else to go. Locke wasn't too comfortable with it, but he intended to decide after seeing where the passage led. Milka stayed in front of the group, but Locke brought her back. According to her, she expected Locke to be like the other nobles and use her as a shield. Locke revealed he was a veteran adventurer, so he had no need for that. After going on for a while, they approached what appeared to be a dead end. Locke, however, could tell that it was a barrier blocked by a powerful spell, specifically the type that might be used for the royal palace's treasury. This intrigued Locke even more, as he wondered why such powerful magic was used there. Locke used Analyze, Trace, and Dispel to easily clear the 6-layered magic block, leaving Lucilla in awe. Another wall emerged after they cleared the magical block, but it was an ordinary wall this time. Locke easily took down the wall with one blow. He heard a voice on the other side, and the person there turned out to be Queen Levi. So the sewers directly led to the royal palace after all. Locke informed the queen about the connection from the sewers to the royal palace. From her surprise, it was clear that she wasn't aware of this connection. He also thanked her for her help during the battle against the High Lord, and then he asked why she was loitering around at such a late hour, nearly without any clothes on. Queen Levi smiled and said her bedroom was next door, and he spotted her with a lot more clothes than she usually wears by this time. Okay, that was too much information. Locke introduced Lucilla and Milka to Queen Levi. The queen recognized Lucilla as the one who protected the royal palace a while back. She especially thanked Lucilla for her job well done in protecting the divine, encouraging Lucilla to ask for whatever she needed. Queen Levi and Locke agreed that it was best nobody ever found out about the secret passage. The queen also revealed that she intended to inform King Eric about the passage. She welcomed Locke back home, and they said their goodbyes, leaving Locke to seal the passage again. On their way back, Milka fell asleep, and Locke carried her. Lucilla asked him if he could make Milka the latest addition to their family, pointing out that even her nutrition was poor in the sewers. Locke agreed to talk to Milka about it the next day. Milka woke up the next day in a strange but large house. She intended to explore the place, but was attacked by the wolf Garb. Locke stopped Garb from hurting her and explained that the wolf must have thought she was a burglar. Everyone came out because of the noise, so Locke used the opportunity to introduce Milka to everyone as the latest member of the family. That morning, Milka bonded with her new family over a well-prepared breakfast. Later that day, Locke announced that he was going to shop for some cleaning tools and stones. Cerise and the little Milka went along with him. They split after they learned that the stonemason was different from the hardware store. Locke gave Milka some money and sent her to get cleaning goods. Unfortunately, the men who chased Milka earlier spotted her again and followed her into the hardware store. They seized her and referred to her as the brat who ran away. She insisted that she had paid up after her grandfather's house was seized, but the men didn't intend to let her go. They announced that she must pay the rest of the debt with her body, intending to sell her to slavery. Fortunately for Milka, two passerby adventurers overheard their conversation and stepped in. After all, King Eric had strictly forbidden human trafficking. The men tried to explain that the child owed a debt and had been discovered to have a huge amount of money with her. Just when the men thought they were getting away with it, Milka explained that she had that amount because she was sent on an errand by her master, Locke. Immediately after the adventurers heard that her master was Locke, they concluded that the men trying to take Milka were scoundrels and the little girl must be protected. Lucky girl, huh? The thugs finally caught on that Ariel and Jeannie were onto their tricks, so they switched tactics and resorted to taking the girl hostage. They grabbed Milka roughly, showing no concern for her well-being. In the blink of an eye, Jeannie fired her arrow, pinning one of the thugs to his cart, while Ariel conjured a fiery attack. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Locke sensed the use of magic and took off running with Cerise following behind. When he reached the scene, he was astonished to find Ariel and Jeannie. The siblings were equally relieved to see him, feeling it was perfect timing. Locke noticed the tied-up thugs and asked about them. Ariel explained that these thugs were attempting to kidnap Milka. As Milka spotted Locke, she became emotional, apologizing for not realizing she still owed some debt and never intending to cause him trouble. Locke sought more clarification from Ariel about the situation, and Ariel explained that he believed the men's boss might be considering selling off Milka as a way to settle the debt, a scheme that, no matter how you sliced it, was far from decent. Locke gathered the fallen coins scattered on the floor, handing them over to Milka with a warm smile. He reminded her of the home she lost and assured her that there was no need to suffer anymore, promising to handle the rest himself. Cerise, on the other hand, was absolutely livid at the thugs for subjecting Milka to such a terrible ordeal. She made a determined vow to turn them over to the authorities. Just as she was about to speak, a group of police officers arrived at the scene, and Cerise took it upon herself to explain, even though Ariel questioned if she was up to the task. Locke took a moment to introduce Ariel to Cerise, mentioning that she was the daughter of the guild master Galan. This revelation surprised the siblings as they were aware of her reputation for defeating an arch-vampire shortly after becoming an F-rank adventurer. They also mentioned that Xia received a share of credit for her role in the battle against the High Lord. It was quite clear that Locke was surrounded by an extraordinary group of individuals. After a heated argument with the police, Cerise returned to give Locke the news. Apparently, the cops had no plans to arrest those troublesome thugs. Locke dug deeper with the officers to confirm this unsettling news. A rather downcast policeman shared the sad truth. Their statement alone wasn't enough to make a solid case. Why, you ask? Well, it turned out the boss of these thugs was a major headache. Even if they did nab the thugs, they would likely be back on the streets in no time. The boss in question, Gabino Donovan, wasn't your everyday troublemaker. He was a big shot who ruled the lower district and had the police officers wrapped around his influential finger. The plot thickened when they spilled the beans on Gabino's ties to the nobles, making it a tough nut to crack for any arrest warrant. Locke wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet, and he quizzed the police about needing concrete evidence. Turns out, even solid evidence hadn't worked in the past, thanks to meddling top brass. Cerise finally grasped that Gabino's web of influence went deep, extending even to the senior officers. The police confirmed this as their reason for not taking more direct action. To make matters worse, Gabino had cooked up a personal army with former adventurers guarding his back, but Locke, being Locke, didn't seem too fazed. He shrugged off the whole personal army story, leading to a friendly police warning about the 30-strong crew that Gabino had in his corner. Locke's response, no big deal, as long as it's only 30. As they were knee-deep in this intriguing conversation, a mysterious person appeared to be eavesdropping on their every word. Later in the day, Locke decided to embark on a little adventure to the Outer Wall District for investigation. This place, well, it wasn't exactly the prettiest part of town. It was more of a slum, full of unpleasant smells and grime, and it was known for housing its fair share of troublemakers. As Locke snooped around, talking to the locals, he uncovered a rather alarming discovery. It turned out that a bunch of children had been mysteriously vanishing from this area over the past few weeks. The plot thickened when Locke recalled that he was told about Gabino's men aiming to sell off someone named Milka, connecting the dots. Locke started suspecting a link between Gabino and the missing children. Meanwhile, at Gabino's warehouse, some rowdy thugs were gambling and drinking. What was truly troubling was that there were innocent children in the room, chained up. The plot thickened as one of Gabino's men rushed into his office with the news about their people and the adventurers. Gabino was not happy and questioned their motives, especially when an important deal was on the line. The man suggested to Gabino that they send the children away for now, as they had the right number of children. Gabino then asked about something called the ham, and the man confirmed it was ready. Gabino thought they might outsmart the police, but worried about the Adventurers Guild. He told his crew to prepare for shipping that night, and saw it as an opportunity for his team to impress and show off their skills to the C-ranked adventurers. Two of his crew members eagerly anticipated getting back at the guild for kicking them out. They also reminded Gabino that they were C-ranked when they left the guild, but now they felt they were on par with B-rank adventurers. Back at the Adventurers Guild, Cerise eagerly asked Locke when he would take action regarding the Gabino situation. Locke noted her over-enthusiasm, but she claimed she was determined to seek justice for what they put Milka through. Milka, appreciating Cerise's concern, expressed her desire to keep her safe from danger. Cerise playfully hugged her, assuring her that she could handle it. Jeannie and Ariel also offered their support. Then Ariel approached Locke with some exciting news. Gabino had been illegally evicting people in the Outer Wall District, and their documents were all fake. Legally, this meant that Milka wouldn't have to pay any debt. Milka and the others were overjoyed by this revelation. Locke offered an apology, but she quickly reassured him, saying it was no big deal. She felt indebted for their help with the goblins, and she was also motivated to assist because Gabino had been recruiting ex-adventurers as his underlings. Moreover, she pledged the guild's backing. Just when things were looking up, the police officers they previously spoke to showed up, but then expressed their support for the team. Even an F-rank adventurer from the guild wanted to show his support. but his attempt was cut short when Shia arrived and captured Locke's attention. That night, as the thugs were trying to take away the children in a wagon to sell, one of the children managed to escape and run off. This led to a chase by the thugs. Just when they were about to catch the girl, out of nowhere Locke showed up and punched one of the thugs, saving the child. The other bad guys then formed a protective circle around their leader, Gabino. Locke said he initially came to discuss Milka's situation, but now that he had caught them, he planned to throw them all in jail. Gabino asked Locke who he was, and Locke cheerfully introduced himself as an F-rank adventurer. Gabino felt insulted and ordered his gang to attack, but Locke easily defeated them all without even breaking a sweat. The B-rank adventurers now joined the fight, and just as they did, Locke's backup arrived. Cerise told Locke to let them, his disciples, handle the fight, which made the thugs laugh, assuming that they were also F-rank. The thugs engaged Cerise and Shia in battle, but struggled against them, wondering how F-rank adventurers could be so tough. Meanwhile, Garb was casually exploring Gabino's mansion when he stumbled upon something in a chest. Outside the mansion, Shia and Cerise maintained an advantage in the battle and eventually defeated the thugs. Even Gabino's strongest men couldn't stand up to them. In a desperate attempt to escape, Gabino tried to run, but Locke intercepted him and sent him flying with a single punch. Garb arrived with the item he found in Gabino's home and handed it over to Locke. As Locke took it, he sensed a strange, cursed feeling from the object. Finally, the officers showed up, and when Gabino spotted the cursed object in Locke's hand, he got mad and tried to grab it back, but Locke stopped him. The police identified the item as a prohibited ham. It wasn't a regular piece of ham, it was just called that because it looked similar. This forbidden ham came from sacred creatures like unicorns and pegasi, and these creatures were sacrificed in a way that was considered sacrilegious to create curses meant for massive rituals too powerful for humans. Locke figured out that someone was behind all of this. While they talked, a bat eavesdropped on their conversation. The police hauled Gabino away and promised to lock him up for good, now as they truly had solid evidence against him. The girl Locke rescued was curious about his name, and he introduced himself as Locke, an F-rank adventurer. Meanwhile, the bat who was eavesdropping earlier headed to a castle and merged with a strong vampire. This vampire then accessed all of the information the bat collected. A vampire's maid then brought a lady to him like a dinner offer, and the vampire wasted no time sipping her blood. In a different part of the mansion, a captive woman prayed, seeking forgiveness for her sins. In their next meeting, Locke, Eric, and Galan talked about business matters involving a hidden passage connecting the royal palace to Locke's grandfather's mistress's estate. They also discussed Locke defeating Gabino and how Gabino had a forbidden item. When Eric heard about the forbidden item, he got lost in thought. After Locke brought him back, Eric revealed a secret. He received a report from the royal court's sorcerers and alchemists. It mentioned that the arch-vampire who attacked the palace had a cursed tool that could nullify the holy barrier. It seemed similar to the divine protection of the gods of the dark that affected Locke in his battle against the High Lord. Locke believed that using the cursed tool would grant access to not only arch-class, but lord-class individuals in the royal capital. Eric wanted Locke to lead the investigation, but it was a challenging task that may require noble support, with uncertain odds as well. Galan suggested using Locke's status, but Locke wanted to keep his identity concealed. Eric promised to help discreetly, and as they discussed, there was a knock at the door, and Locke went to investigate. Cerise proudly displayed Milka's stylish look to Locke, who was pleasantly surprised. Milka blushed, but Locke assured her that she looked charming. Meeting her for the first time, Galan complimented her look. Locke introduced Galan and Eric to her, and they all seemed thrilled to meet her. During breakfast, Locke discussed his ongoing cursed tool investigation with his companions. Shia offered her assistance, given her keen sense of smell, which was particularly valuable if vampires were involved. Locke appreciated her offer. When Cerise volunteered to help, Locke smiled nervously, saying it wasn't needed, which upset her. Shia stepped in, suggesting that Cerise could gather information at the guild. Shia then asked Locke about his plans, and he mentioned that he and Lucilla would work on restoring the secret passage. Later, Locke met up with Galan and Eric. Eric asked Locke to ensure the underground passage remained accessible, just in case they needed it in the future. He also mentioned that in a worst-case scenario, his family could use it for evacuation. Locke suggested that they get Levi's opinion on the matter, since it was connected next to her bedroom. Eric assured Locke that Levi had initially proposed the idea herself and seemed to have been inspired when Locke visited her that night. Eric suddenly turned to Locke and playfully asked if he spotted Levi running around without any clothes on. Despite Locke's warnings to her, Levi had a spirited personality, and it often led to amusing situations. Locke, feeling a bit tongue-tied, didn't quite know how to explain what he witnessed that night. But luckily, Lucilla came to his rescue by fibbing to Eric, claiming that Levi was fully dressed, and even Gerberga vouched for it. Eric apologized for suspecting Locke, and Galan joined in, suggesting that Locke should find a special someone too. Later on in the castle, Locke shared some exciting news with Levi and her children. He had cast a spell to make the entrance invisible to regular people. Levi, curious as always, asked if sorcerers would still be able to see them. Locke reassured her, explaining that he had placed a magical lock that only allowed the door to be opened for its rightful owners, keeping everyone else out. Locke instructed everyone to point their hands at the passage door to become registered as owners. They praised Locke and eagerly rushed to do it. Lucilla complimented Locke for the door. Locke planned to magically repair and strengthen the passage and connect it to the castle's exit, allowing Eric's family to move freely. This made Eric's children happy, as Locke could visit the royal palace too. At the Adventurers, Guild, Cerise and Shia searched for missing persons requests, suspecting others might be involved in kidnapping like Gabino. Unfortunately, they didn't find any such requests. They eventually ran into Ariel and Jeannie, expressing their gratitude for their assistance in taking down Gabino. The siblings kindly asked Shia to reach out whenever they needed a hand, then shared their plans with Cerise and Shia about a quest to rid these sewers of demonic rats. After saying their goodbyes, Ariel and Jeannie departed. As Ariel and Jeannie headed towards their rat extermination mission, Cerise brought up the topic of Locke's true identity and estate, speculating that Ariel and Jeannie might be in for a shock if they ever found out. In the meantime, as they walked toward the sewers, Ariel turned to Jeannie and asked her who she thought Locke really was. Jeannie responded by noting that Locke claimed to be an F rank, but his strength suggested he may have been a high-level hunter or scout originally. Ariel wondered why Locke was keeping his identity a secret, and Jeannie suggested he might be running from someone dangerous. In the sewer, they faced a swarm of demonic rats, and Ariel noticed these rats were different, not fearing humans. Meanwhile, in the capital, Cerise and Shia searched for missing people, finding many cases involving runaways, disappearances, and complicated situations. They returned to the guild, where they saw Ariel and other guild workers looking worried because Ariel and Jeannie still hadn't returned 8 hours later. Cerise rushed to get Locke, while Shia hurried to the sewers. Locke and Cerise quickly caught up with Shia in the sewers, and he asked for a situation update. She informed him that the siblings likely entered through the entrance but hadn't returned, and there were no other exits. Locke suggested they move forward, and he would use magic search since Ariel was a sorcerer. They might pick up a signal from them with the magic search. Locke continued to follow their trail into a tunnel. They ran into a swarm of demonic rats, and Locke decided to eliminate all of them at once to save time. As they ventured deeper into the tunnel, they stumbled upon a massive demonic rat feasting on its kin. Shia dashed away, convinced she heard Jeannie's voice. Locke also fled, leaving Cerise behind. Eventually, Locke reunited with Ariel and Jeannie, who were hidden in a corner. Ariel apologized for the scare, and while they were fine, their clothes suffered a nibble or two. They briefed Locke on the situation just as Cerise came sprinting, pursued by the giant rat. Locke instructed Ariel to use his most potent flame attack, but Ariel worried about suffocation due to the thin air. Locke promised to redirect the flames upwards. Next, Locke asked Cerise to expose the rat's belly, and after some reluctance, she leaped high, landed on the rat, stabbed it with her sword, and exposed its belly. Locke commanded Ariel to unleash all of his firepower on the rat. Ariel shot a fiery ball at demonic rats, but it was hotter than expected. They later pondered the enormous size of the demonic rat. Suddenly, Cerise discovered a mysterious item next to the rat and shared it with Locke, suggesting it may have magical significance. Shia examined it and identified it as an evil god statue. After their chat, Locke headed to Marquis Mastine's estate to apologize, but was met by a gate servant who questioned his purpose there. He tried to explain the property damage incident, but the servant rudely dismissed him, insisting there was no damage. Locke decided to call it quits and headed out. Meanwhile, at Marquis Mastine's mansion, vampires had somehow taken over, and their leader watched Locke's departure, surprised that Locke had already reached the mansion. He instructed a subordinate to investigate Locke, especially regarding his family. Back at the Adventurers Guild, everyone was ecstatic about Ariel and Jeannie's return. Locke walked in, and Ariel inquired about his meeting with the estate owner and whether he would need to repay them. Locke relayed what the lady said, leaving Ariel in shock. Cerise wondered if the Marquis's nonchalant response was due to his high status in the country. Ariel joined the chat, mentioning a case of 3 workers vanishing from Marquis Mastine's estate during Cerise and Shia's search for missing people, which was cancelled by the questgiver. Ariel and Jeannie expressed thanks to Locke, bid farewell, and returned home. On their way, a vampire servant discreetly observed them. In their estate, Cerise and Shia discussed Locke's suspicions about the Marquis. Shia clarified that only the questgiver withdrew, and the missing people remained unfound. Cerise questioned why the guild hadn't taken action, and Shia explained that if the questgiver retracts it, the guild can't intervene further. Shia suspected the situation held clues about the enemy's true identity. It appeared the enemy manipulated the questgiver to cancel the search quest, a skill often linked to vampires who can charm others into not recognizing them. That night, Locke assembled everyone and shared a strong suspicion that the Marquis's estate might be under vampire influence. Eric questioned this, given Marquis Mastine's capable background in government roles, but he had been absent for a month, citing health issues. Locke presented evidence, an item that caused the sewer's demonic rat to grow. Shia identified it as the god of the dark statue, shocking Eric and Galen as it resembled the statue Locke struggled with before. Shia confirmed their suspicion. Back at the Marquis's mansion, a captured man secretly passed a letter to his dog, Tama, asking him to deliver it to the king. Inside the mansion, the vampire leader ordered his underlings to hunt down Locke. Meanwhile, at Locke's estate, the team continued their discussion. During their chat, vampire underlings suddenly crashed in through the windows. Locke rescued Milka from one of them while Cerise searched for her sword. A vampire attempted to attack her, but her father came to the rescue, advising her not to rely on what she didn't have when hunting prey. Galen realized these vampires were not your usual underlings. They easily broke through their magical barrier, and they might possess cursed powers. Eric warned Locke not to use his magic to avoid revealing his identity. The others in the room individually started fighting the vampires and managed to defeat most of them effortlessly. Lucilla tried to lead Milka to the cellar for safety, but right before they could move, a vampire burst through the window, reaching out for them. In a clever move, Locke stepped in, using an illusion to make the vampire think it was being strangled by the demon lord. While the others were battling the vampire, Locke sensed a vampire bat watching them and communicated with the vampire leader through it, warning him to stay away from his family before eliminating the bat. After the team defeated all the vampires, they received an unexpected visit from Tama, whom Eric recognized as the Marquis's pet dog. Tama delivered a letter to Eric, and after reading it, Eric shared the alarming news that their situation was more dire than they thought. Their enemy was a new High Lord, and the target was the Marquis family's youngest daughter, Lady Philly. It was a race against time. Mastine's pet dog led the way with Locke and King Eric in tow. Meanwhile, back at Locke's residence, Milka seemed rather worried, and Galin questioned if she was okay. Galin reassured her that Locke and Eric wouldn't run into a swarm of vampire lords like they did before. They hadn't done wrong sending just the two of them out. He was a bit worried, as there were bound to be many subordinates still lurking, but they had to focus on their priority of moving Jurberga somewhere safe. He suggested they ask for Queen Levi's help via the underground passage. Cerise stepped in to restate that Locke would be fine and Milka shouldn't worry so much. He had saved the country many times before. He might not look like it, but Shia chimed that he was quite capable despite first impressions. Galen wrapped it up by saying everyone in the room had been saved by Locke at one time or another, and if that didn't prove he was capable, what would? Locke and Eric arrived at what seemed to be the gates of Mastine's home. They were a family of 3 currently residing: the Marquis, his wife, and his youngest daughter. Locke and Eric's strategy was to go full frontal, as they would be discovered anyway, and there was no time to waste. Eric now had a pending duty to cover the expenses of the damages caused on the Mastine's property. Locke blasted through the gates, which alerted all the subordinates within the estate. They charged into the house, and it was a full-blown battle where Locke executed a magical endowment enchant skill. From some sort of prison within the house, the Mastine family could hear the ensuing battle. Help had come faster than they expected. Once the subordinates had been defeated, Locke asked the pet dog Tama to lead him and Eric to where the rest of the family were being kept. The dog led them through passageways and then down some stairs. At some point, Eric sensed danger and halted the dog, stepping in front to take charge and protect. A vampire materialized, stating he didn't expect any less as they easily defeated the subordinate maids from earlier. At this point, it must be custom for the bad guy to ask for the identity of their opponent because they were constantly doing it. Eric didn't budge in this case when the question was thrown at him. They exchanged blows, and Eric's mask fell off in the process, revealing his identity to the vampire. The vampire talked about command and divine protection from the dark god, and a little sister for which he must avenge. The vampire released a simultaneous attack which released long tentacles from him to attack Eric. The vampire also had a cloning skill, and Eric kept striking at decoys. His saving grace, however, was his speed that helped him dodge retaliating attacks from the vampire. Eric was able to get the last laugh by strategically getting behind the vampire and striking from there. He landed another strike with his sword through the vampire's head, and it was game over. The vampire turned to ash, leaving behind its medallion. Tama resumed its duty, scratching at a section of the wall which Eric interpreted to mean it led to where the Mastine family were being held captive. There seemed to be a magical lock on it, and Eric called out to Locke for his assistance, but where was Locke? He seemed to have disappeared. Locke seemed to be somewhere in the passageway, killing off a heavy number of vampires with a heap of ash to prove it. He spotted a door to a room which he believed the vampires were protecting. It had a magical lock, which he easily broke, referring to it as a piece of cake. In the room, he found a large mirror. Meanwhile, Eric, in Locke's absence, was left with no choice but to use brute force to break through the magic lock. He was faced with the Mastine family, who were waiting behind the door, Marquis holding tightly to his wife in momentary fear. King Eric explained he got Marquis's letter, and Marquis in return was marveling that the king personally came to the rescue. Maybe it was safe to say that Tama was the true hero, as it successfully delivered the letter to the king in the first place. It could have strayed away, but kept its duty to the Mastine family and Lady Philly a true dog hero indeed. Speaking of Philly, though, where was she? Marquis took the king on a trip down memory lane to a time they employed a butler upon someone's recommendation. He was rather good and effective at his job, and within 6 months, he was successfully managing all of the estate's housekeeping. About a month ago, the butler changed. He seized all of the other servants and imprisoned the family. Turns out, he was a vampire lord all along who started to summon other vampires. The royal capital had a barrier, and such creatures should not have been able to get past it in the first place. In conclusion, the vampire's infiltration led back to about a year ago. It was also revealed that a vampire high lord took Philly away. In another scene, Locke was shown placing his palm on the mirror. He analyzed it must be a teleportation circle, and on the other side of the mirror would be the enemy's headquarters. Locke continued to press against the mirror, and it seemed he was getting sucked in until he was attacked by more vampires. He did his thing, slicing through them with his signature sword. They were curious to know if he had the divine protection of the dark god on him as well, but Locke was too annoyed to answer, obliterating them once and for all. On Eric's end, the vampire lord rose from the ash and struck with his tentacle. It looked like he had hit Eric where it hurt, but his cloak had a charm on it cast by his wife. He announced that he had the divine protection of a goddess before finishing off the vampire and breaking its medallion in two. Galan and the rest approached Queen Levi with a proposal of taking care of Gerberga, to which she agreed. Back with Eric, he got the Mastine couple out of the room and questioned why their daughter was a target for the vampires. The Marquis shamefully admitted Philly had had a recent obsession with magic, alchemy in particular. It led her to unintentionally create a fool's stone. A fool's stone, it's the antimatter of the sage's stone. It had the power to accumulate and possess curses. According to the alchemists of the royal court, it had indeed been reported that the cursed medallions were made from fool's stone. It still didn't clarify why the vampires would try to take Philly's life, seeing as she was probably more important to them alive than dead. It appeared that the spark that led to the refining of the fool's stone required a channel that connected to another world, and their altered program required the existence of a spiritual medium to open and summon a channel with the other world. It was the summoning of the gods of the dark. Meanwhile, Locke had located Philly, who had been held captive by the gods of the dark, slowly breaching both worlds. Locke planned to rescue Philly. To get to Philly, Locke and his giant sword would have to go through some other vampire dude with sorcerer skills. The vampire created some sort of portal or shield, and when Locke struck at it, more than half of his sword disappeared. The vampire explained Locke was now connected to the underworld, and the missing part of his sword existed there in a different dimension. Since his sword was now basically worthless, Locke discarded it, stating he was still very much so powerful without it. He packed a mean punch, drawing out blood from hitting the vampire many times and squarely in the face. The vampire told him not to get ahead of himself. Turns out, the vampire regenerated quickly and acted just as fast as he started to create another sorcery spell. 3 loopholes appeared from above, and a beast wielding a sword emerged from them alongside 2 others. The vampire had summoned the Magian. This should be impossible, according to Philly, unless the High Lord could use dark magic that was linked to ancient magic. The vampire commanded the Magian to deal with an unfazed Locke. His only surprise seemed to be that there were surviving Magian to begin with. Locke created a series of spells that caused the beasts to cover their ears in agony over what seemed to be an irritating sound only they could hear. It was so bad that they returned back to the holes where they came from. Both the High Lord and Philly were beyond confused about what just happened. Locke vaguely stated that he was a celebrity in the other dimension. The High Lord reported he still had no idea what was going on, but whatever deception Locke had used had no effect on him. It was just a lot of talk and no action, because before the High Lord could do his thing, Locke already delivered his point-blank magic buckshot that left the gigantic beast thing still holding Philly captive. It opened its mouth and let out dark air, making Locke wonder what it was manifesting. Meanwhile, Eric and the Mastine couple had found the room with the mirror, and they could hear strange, terrifying sounds coming through it. Eric told quickly that the mirror was a teleportation mirror, and it cannot be accessed unless by a sorcerer. Whatever was happening beyond the mirror, they could only hope that Locke was in control. The Marquis's curiosity got the better of him. He wanted to know if Locke was one of the royal sorcerers, since he was so famous. King Eric clarified Locke was a close buddy that goes all the way back. Philly had a request for Locke. She wanted Locke to kill her, claiming it was what she deserved for creating the fool's stone that had caused so much mayhem. She did it unintentionally, but it helped the dark beings in so many ways. If she died, then the evil god currently holding her captive would stop manifesting. The evil god was trying to open a path into their world by using her as a vessel to attract other gods. Locke asked her her real intentions behind the fool's stone creation, as it wasn't something that was created on a whim. She explained she wasn't doing alchemical research like everyone thinks. She specialized in researching ancient languages, the analysis of literature from ancient magical kingdoms. Among the literature she was able to successfully analyze was something on alchemy. Wanting to verify their legitimacy, she became engrossed in ancient alchemy. Ancient magical techniques do not simply influence the logic of this world. They exploit godly powers by forming a channel with another dimension. Locke shared a similar desire towards ancient magic research and believed that no one would surpass him in that desire. But here was Philly who proved otherwise. Locke's sword was returned to him, back at full length, since the connection between the other dimension was broken now that the High Lord and Conjurer were laying dead. He then confidently announced to Philly to hold on tight as she would be reunited with her parents soon. He performed a quadruple barrier, which sent a surge of energy straight at the evil god. The move was so spectacular that a beast-folk father and daughter saw it from afar, and the daughter questioned if the light they had just witnessed was a shooting star. He called it an ominous light and asked her to return home. He then told a messenger to alert the royal capital. He hoped what they had just witnessed was a false alarm. Against all odds, the evil god had not yet been defeated, and Philly was still being held captive, hopefully not for long, as Locke had resumed his stance with his signature sword intact and complete. This must be the first time both the evil god and Philly were noticing the significance of the sword, which was currently glowing with power. Locke's quadruple barrier attack wasn't enough to finish off the evil god, because it was from a dimension with rules that didn't conform to his world's logic. This was why his magical barrier was rendered invalid. His sword, however, did conform to the logic of the evil god's dimension. His next strike would not be rendered invalid. The evil god opened its maw and started to chant something. Some of its tentacles fell off and became beasts of their own, with large, eerie eyes and limbs to attack. Locke referred to them as offspring of an evil god. Philly continued to watch, rather amused. Locke seemed to be having fun fighting the evil god. Indeed, it did seem like all fun and games until Locke was struck with a dark ray of light, which caused a hole in the middle of his chest. Locke collapsed to the floor as the evil god was still chanting. Back at the castle, Levi and Galan recalled Locke was indeed a bookworm for ancient magic research, so bad it could be considered an addiction. There was even a time he faced off dragons just for books written in cryptic ancient languages, and he did manage to decipher some of them. Although, that doesn't necessarily mean Locke practices ancient magic, does it? Locke's ability to learn the life-transferring, draining touch skill that the Magian commander used was because the learning skill itself was the ancient spell that formed the basis of the Magian's dark magic. Learning this spell was composed of 4 different spells: learning, analysis, conversion, and reconstruction. Fundamentally, one can instantly understand the opponent's cast magic. This was a technique incidentally discovered through ancient magic research. Philly couldn't see any way out other than to commit suicide now that Locke was presumably dead. Locke got back on his feet and stated he had a promise to keep. She would see her parents again, and although it was a complicated spell, he learned it. He recreated the dark ray, giving the evil god a taste of his own medicine. Philly was released into his arms in the process. It wasn't over yet, though. Locke told Philly to hide somewhere safe and keep her gratitude till after they had escaped. Locke continued to execute the dark ray spell, but the evil god regenerated quickly. His right shoulder received a severe blow that burned off a chunk. As cool as a dark ray spell was, it wasn't proving fruitful. Locke tried something else. The spell was unstable and exhausted an incredible amount of mana. But if he were to use the Magian ruler's sword as a catalyst to draw out his maximum power, the thing is, if it didn't work out then, they were all doomed. The spell was called Spatial Collapse, and Locke, ever the risk-taker, decided to execute it. Even Philly caught on quickly as she remained on the sideline, still watching rather than taking cover. The attack was futile, and Locke had succeeded in isolating the entire space. Philly saw it was rather a massive space, meaning amazing magical power. Now for the finishing touches, ROM's space implosion, an ultra-dense spatial cage that even the surrounding space was warping from the gravity. It was basically a neutron star. Locke topped it off with the dark ray extravaganza, and now it was game over. Locke collapsed once more, but this time it was because he had exhausted all of his mana. Philly was there to catch him, though. On the bright side, the evil god had disappeared, and that was a relief. Philly and Locke teleported back to a waiting king and parents who were glad to see them both. Eric questioned the state of things, and Locke let him know he had defeated the evil god. The Marquis then realized this must be the legendary Great Sage. Locke's secret was becoming not so much of a secret as more people kept figuring it out. At the scene of a battle, a vampire stood in the midst of dust and ash. Once again, the world was saved by the legendary Great Sage, no surprise. A human who was able to defeat the evil god, even if it was just the head. A personal request was sent out by the guild master to a group of rank adventurers. Their job was to gather as much intelligence that was left over at the hideout. A man referred to as Laboro was asked by a member of his crew to cast a magical exploration spell. Laboro might have one eye obstructed by an eye patch, but it didn't stop him from seeing something big, literally big. A large woman leering close from over the mountains, enough to make him sweat. His comrade shook him back to reality. It was gone as fast as it appeared. To think a rank adventurer like himself was almost bewitched from eye contact just made him wonder who on earth did he see. Someone far more dangerous than a High Lord, it seemed. Locke's shoulder had been healed by Levi's healing power, so it was a lot better now, but his hair color had yet to return to a darker shade. The king apologized for sending him on such a dangerous mission by himself, and Locke basically replied he wasn't forced to take charge, and Eric shouldn't be afraid to rely on him more. It was just that for Eric, the thought of losing his close buddy wasn't a walk in the park. One time 10 years ago was enough for him. Galen chimed in. He too complained that Locke had a solo habit, and that's not cool as their comrades. Locke apologized and switched the conversation to the evil god, asking if its hideout had been discovered. Galen updated them about the rank adventurers he sent out that had yet to report back. As for the Mastine family, they had been able to track down the person who referred the evil butler about a year ago. When Philly was ordered to make a fool's stone using alchemy, she deliberately made a faulty product with the pretense of discarding it, flushing it down the sewers on purpose. She wanted someone to find it. Her exact plan might not have been for the sewer rats to find it, but it did lead to everyone discovering the artifact. There was still the question of whether the vampires had always acted out this systematically, and it seemed that from all indications, they were merely following the orders of a higher order, someone even greater than the High Lord. 10 years ago, the war was between Locke and the Magin. This time, the enemy was different. It was a face-off between humans and the vampires. Meanwhile, Lady Philly was high up on a tower, scattering petals all over the Mastine cemetery. The servants who lost their lives to subordination were buried in the cemetery, and Lady Philly's purpose was to scatter petals to provide repose for their souls. The petals were from the flowers that the estate maids carefully cultivated in the courtyard. As time went on, Locke's hair color began to change back. These days, he had the massive residence to himself mostly. Cerise had been going out on quests with Ariel and Jeannie lately. As of today, she was in search of a livestock thief. Shia and Garb, the wolf, went home to the beastfolk tribe for the first time in a while. The two had been getting along quite well. Lucilla and Gerberga, the chicken, had become regular playmates with the princess. Then there's Milka, who had found a hobby in cooking and was with one of Galen's chefs at the estate to teach her. Now Locke stepped outside to do some sweeping of fallen leaves. He piled them up and burned them. Philly approached him with Tama. They hadn't seen each other in quite a while, and Tama seemed to have gained weight. Philly had come to apologize for not knowing who exactly her hero was. Her father scolded her as well, so she got on her knees and asked Locke to excuse her impertinence. Locke clarified he was no one but Locke, an F-rank adventurer, so Philly didn't need to execute the extra gestures. Locke noticed she had come with a suitcase and questioned her about it. Eric did mention to Locke earlier that he would need a new assistant. That assistant would be Philly. King Eric had been rather cocky, but Locke couldn't overlook that Philly was talented. There was also the possibility that the vampires might attack again. This meant that the safest place for Philly was by Locke's side. Congratulations to him were in order because his family just got bigger. Let's take a little journey into the past. 20 years ago, at the west end of the Kingdom of Garand, north of the Kingdom of Miller, near the border of Ringen, an ancient ruin was discovered. Someone trespassed into the ruin and released a seal on something locked and hidden within it. This action would become a grave mistake, as it brought forth the calamity that caused the annihilation of Garand and almost Mandelbar in what would later be known as the Crimson Week of Black Dragons. The mistake would also make ground for the legendary adventurer party and the sage known as Luck Franzen. Here marks the beginning of their story. A week before the tragic event, the adventurer party just comprised of the duo Galen, a 23-year-old B-rank warrior, and Luck, a 19-year-old B-rank sorcerer who continued to research magic on his own after dropping out of an academy of magic at the age of 16. The duo teamed up after a quest and continued adventuring together. Here, Galen asked Luck for the earnings from their recent adventuring together, as he remembered Luck telling him about a magical item. Luck spent the earnings, a sum of 20 million rupees, on acquiring the item he had been searching for, the Artemis's arrow. This item had the ability to slay 1,000,000 demons in one shot and would prove useful and worth the price later on. Galen, after hearing the ability of the item, agreed it was a fair price. Galen still thought it was a stupid purchase since he never bought a bow to go with it. Now, the main purpose of Galen's visit was to inform Luck of the recently discovered ruin. The earlier described one quite uncertain if it was fortunate or unfortunate news. Since Luck had been searching for a quest involving investigation of unexplored ruins, he jumped at the news and ready to set out immediately to Katya in the Kingdom of Garand, where the ruin resided. The guild did not place any restrictions on how many adventurers can participate in the quest, and this left them on a first-come, first-served kind of situation. Even if they wanted to get there fast and before other adventurers, Luck spent all of the money on the Artemis's arrow, so they had no funds left to hire a fast horse. Desperate and even willing to take a loan, they set out for the Katya ruin. 2 days later, they got to the Kingdom of Garand and met a tragic sight. A long line of refugees from Katya, the survivors of the devastation brought upon Katya by a swarm of dragons. Normally, this would not be a safe or wise time to excavate ruins, and they both knew it. To make matters worse, Galen would be useless against the dragons as they flew and attacked aerially. This duo continued their quest as Galen believed that Luck would figure something out, just like he had done countless times when Galen was at death's door. But first, Galen decided that they head to the guild and informed them about the situation, which at the time was the best course of action. On getting to the royal capital of Goldmud in the Kingdom of Garand, they met the branch head of the Goldmud Guild branch, Coronet, who was thrown into a state of utter panic and crisis, as the casualties occurred only a day after the report of the revival of dragons was made by a guild adventurer. Coronet was frantically looking for information about the current state of the calamity when Luck and Galen came right in with the information they had. The duo arrived tired but still delivered the information, telling Coronet and the other guild members present that the fire would be extinguished the next day, but at the moment, it was spreading. Everything that caught fire was gone, especially the humans, as 30% of the citizens were scorched to death, leaving just 70% as the injured, and that percentage was about 100,000 people. If the dead were not killed by the hot flame, they were devoured by the dragons. Curious, Coronet asked how many dragons were at the ruins in Katya, so they informed him that they were only able to confirm the presence of 4 dragons. They added that one of the dragon dens was west of the town, and they were black dragons. Immediately, Coronet knew this was a highly sensitive situation, and given that the dragons were black ones, they had no chance of salvaging the issue through negotiation. Topping it off would be the fact that there were about 10 dragons in the den. There are 5 types of dragons based on their physical color. The types include the red, white, blue, green, and black dragons. Among this species, the black dragon is considered the most dangerous because the satisfaction they get is from destruction and devouring humans. Therefore, trying to talk to the dragon would prove useless to mankind. The black dragons should never have been allowed to exist. With all the information that they shared with him, Coronet pleaded that they join in the subjugation force with the guild branch as he was about to relay the new information to the chivalric order, which was the main force of the subjugation force. Instead of being paid, Luck asked the branch head to give them priority in the excavation of the Katia ruin exploration. The branch head knew that this was a huge favor and a big ask, but with the desperate need for all the help the guild branch could get, he agreed to consider it as long as they contributed well enough to the subjugation, so the fulfillment depended on how the two did in battle against the dragons. In 2 days, a makeshift adventurer party consisting of C ranks and B ranks, and the chivalric order set off to subjugate the black dragons. The chivalric order and their servants made up a headcount of 1,200 men, and the adventurers that came together consisted of 60 C ranks, 19 B ranks, and 7 A ranks, which was an achievement for an impromptu assembly of adventurers. Suddenly, a spectacle ensued as someone walked in claiming to be the royal hero invited by the king to join in the subjugation. Luck noticed something off about this individual immediately, a surrounding of dark mist amid the crowd. There was also another suspiciously masked man observing the so-called hero. The adventurers around were elated to have someone strong and renowned on their side. Then the unexpected happened. The chivalric order, which was supposed to be the main force in the subjugation, decided out of cowardice to set camp in the entrance of the royal capital under the guise of protecting the royal capital, when they truly did not want to lay their lives in harm's way on the front line. This made the branch head Coronet so angry as it was left with just 86 adventurers as the subjugation force. Fear also set back the Holy Magic Order, which was meant to be a helpful part of the subjugation force in terms of magic. The archpriest was filled with fear for his life and decided that they stay put in the royal capital, falsely attributing it to the will of God. One priestess stood out as she was determined to contribute to the subjugation, even if it meant her excommunication from the Holy Magic Order. She called the archpriest out on his cowardice, even when he threatened that she would regret leaving, making it clear that she had parted ways with the order, and his fear was a sign that God had forsaken him. This priestess's name was Levi Leonard Ardens. Stunning, she drew the attention of all when she took off the veil. The hero asked her to allow him to be her personal bodyguard since she looked so beautiful. He introduced himself as Eric Mandar, which left Levi confused as it turned out that she was familiar with Eric before this day. The other real adventurers got right into coming up with a good strategy, but it seemed hard to do, facing the reality of less than 90 men against over 10 black dragons. It all boiled down to whether they could stop the dragons in their tracks, that is, trapping or grounding the dragons. Thankfully, there were top-notch adventurers available, like Old Man Raglan and a rank sorcerer and the Maniac Warrior Tour and some other bona fide ones. An idea showed up involving Raglan using his magical web, which was powerful and could hold dragons down to the earth, but had the limit of just 4 in one go. With this, the Warrior Tour and the others would have to distract the dragons and split them up into several groups, so it was easy to bring them down little by little. Looking at their numbers, most of the adventurers couldn't think of a better strategy than that. In the conclusion of their plans, the conceited impersonator butted in, asking them why they went on to plan without his permission or even inclusion. The top-notch adventurers asked him to just watch their backs for now, jokingly, because they didn't find him reliable. Here, Levi took a look at the suspiciously masked man and recognized that he was the real Eric, causing Eric to move away from her anxiously. Meanwhile, the imposter was making plans to punish the others for not acknowledging him as their leader. He planned to use one of these special items given to him from the king to show them why he should be their leader. Galen asked Luck what he thought about the current strategy, to which he dodged responsibility, saying if it were left to him, he would think of a better strategy, as the amount of damage they might suffer from the current one was uncertain. Luck added that he would just focus on being the backup. Sooner than expected, his desires were handed to him that night as the black dragons attacked and raided them instead of the other way around. Struggling to keep up with this awful chaos and guard their lives, they tried to retreat and regroup, but it proved difficult. Things started to take a bad turn as the dragons took advantage of the confusion and started killing them one by one, starting with the rank adventurers. Old Man, Raglan, and Tur went down to the well-coordinated attack of the dragons. Forced to do something to avoid annihilation, Galen and Luck teamed up to take the dragons down. Another masked adventurer supported their plan, providing wind protection. Luck used a magic lance to lower the dragon to the ground, creating room for Galen to land a strike. Even when Galen did, it had little effect on the dragon, and it still did not affect the dragon when the weapon got enchanted. Levi cast a heavenly protection spell to heal and enchant them. Luckily, it was time for the true hero to shine. He took off his scarf and asked Luck to lower the dragons to the ground, assuring that it was all Luck had to do. When Luck lowered the dragon in a dazzling manner, Eric took down 2 dragons in one slash till they were none left, astounding everyone. At the end of the raid, there were 5 A rankers, 2 B rankers, and 2 C rankers injured, and this was a major blow, leaving them no choice but to ask for help again from the chivalric order. Next, the real Eric exposed the imposter by bringing out the dragon flute the so-called hero used. At this point, the imposter was petrified and began to explain with fear. On further probing, he disclosed that a woman gave him the flute and told him that he could use it to bend dragons to his will, but he didn't think that it would cause all this chaos. The woman was a female elf invited to the royal palace as a guest of honor. Even Galen knew that the woman that showed up to the palace was an imposter as well. Luck confirmed it by informing the others that the guy had traces of magical power surrounding him and was likely under some kind of spell. The others were stunned at Luck's ability to decipher something like that, as sorcerers above his rank like Old Man Raglan didn't notice. Luck had other curiosities, like the identity of the swordsman and the sword. They all got to understand that the swordsman was the real hero and prince of Mandelbar, Eric Amart Mandelbar, and the sword, Levi explained, was a holy sword. With this behind them, they took to Luck for directions as to the next course of subjugation, especially the prince. Meanwhile, back at the royal castle of Garand, the female elf murdered King Zash. They got to the entrance of the Black Dragon Den under Luck's plan and leadership, which was decided about 10 hours before they got to the dragon's den. According to the hero Eric, Luck was the most qualified to draft strategies, and there was a high chance he was the only one with accurate enough information about the black dragons among those present. The masked adventurer accompanying them almost agreed immediately, adding that Luck was calm during the black dragon attack and level-headed figured out what their target was. The others agreed even though there were higher-ranked adventurers among them. As long as he had been nominated by the hero Eric, his leadership was a done deal. Luck wasn't really a fan of responsibility and reliability, so he didn't jump at the position but had to fill the shoes reluctantly. Now back to their plan for the Black Dragons. Luck's strategy was to avoid a full-blown deathmatch with the Black Dragons like what had happened earlier. His plan involved Galen and the warriors luring the Black Dragons out of their den. There was no need to fight them head-on. They just simply needed to hide and let them move past the den. While the Black Dragons were away, Luck planned to plant some magical bombs inside of their den, killing them once they returned to the den. The dragons would be lured out with the dragon flute and far away so there was enough time to set up the bombs. They progressed with the plan, luring the dragons out, but almost got noticed by one of the black dragons. However, they were saved by Luck's mind obstruction magic. The dragons did not rely on their nose despite their intellect, because if they did, the plan would be futile and in their death. The black dragons were moving faster than expected, and it took a while before they realized that this spelled doom, as the black dragons were heading straight for the royal capital without Galen and the warriors using the dragon flute. The branch head guild master Coronet headed to the capital with some adventurers to assist the chivalric order. The helmet-wearing adventurer asked Galin to hop on her horse so they could get the dragon flute to lock so he could call them back once he was done setting the bombs, a small alteration to their original plan. The adventurer took off the helmet and armor to reveal a voracious and gorgeous woman, which left Galin flustered even in their current crisis. She introduced herself as Marguerite and asked him to strip his armor off so the horse could get there faster. Meanwhile, in the den, Luck, together with the hero and Levi, met a surprise. The ruin was not made to hold the black dragons. It was made to imprison something even stronger. The prison was made for a remnant of the mythical days, a god of calamity that had destroyed civilization many times over, the evil dragon. Luckily, the evil dragons were still sealed away in the prison, but it looked like someone had managed to release one. This someone was the impersonator of the female elf, the woman who gave the dragon flute. In the worst of ways, an evil dragon appeared in the royal capital and began to cause havoc. The plan of the female vampire was to kill as many citizens as feeding the fool's stone would require. Evil dragons were apostles of a demon that went against the gods, and a legend has it that 10 evil dragons kept the earth in flames for a century. From the camp the chivalric order made, they could see the royal capital engulfed by a curse that would kill everyone in it, and on the other side, they were met with a swarm of dragons heading their way. In a twinkle, the black dragons incinerated the chivalric order and headed to the capital. On the other hand, Luck had no choice other than to jump into the prison and seal the evil dragons and black dragons again. The others couldn't join him as the job was only for a sorcerer, and they would just be burdens. Using his cultivated technique of learning, where he absorbs the skills and spells cast from ancient magic and can replicate it, he learns the several hundred-layered sealing magic of the Forbidden Tome, the existence of which he withheld from Eric, this technique being his only chance at victory. The female vampire immediately sensed that someone had touched the seal barrier of the evil dragons, so she sent the black dragons back to their den to keep the intruders out. Unfortunately, her plan was coming together as the door to the interdimensional rift appeared and started opening. Forbidden Tome is the general term for a magical tool that is always employed as a catalyst for powerful incantations, which does not always take the shape of a book, though they have something in common: a wealth of information recorded within them. Learning a high-class magic that enables the analysis of any magic that is touched, even ancient or dark magic. The hero Eric and Levi could only wait and hope that luck succeeded before the black dragons returned to the den. They were soon met by their fear as black dragons stormed the den with attacks. The hero defended to the best of his ability against the attacks. As usual, he cut through a couple, but soon realized that the dragons were too much and outnumbered their forces. A black dragon was about to do him in, but Galin and Marguerite arrived just in time to save Eric and fight with him. Together, they fought the dragons off, giving Luck the opportunity to seal the dragons again, as they were sure he would definitely pull it off. Before the evil female vampire could bring her plans into fruition, bringing Magin from the other dimension and leading an era of chaos, the flow of the curse got severed, and Luck restored the seal of the Forbidden Tome. This resulted in all the black dragons and the evil dragon returning to its prison, but it brought something stronger back: the last boss, an evil dragon. This evil dragon had an unimaginable explosive power and could even teleport. What's worse is the fact that it was still roaming in the sky after the seal was restored. Regardless of the strength, they were safe because of the barrier seal that Luck restored. The reason why that evil dragon still remained in their plane was because it made a direct contact with the evil female vampire. Therefore, it still had a connection to the realm of the living. Quickly, they were spotted by the dragon, and this meant bad news as the barrier would not last long if they didn't do anything about the dragon. The sealing barrier was made to entrap the evil dragon, but isn't impervious to external attacks. Left with no other choice, Luck was forced to use his 20 million rupee ace, the Artemis's arrow, coupled with a magic circle derived from ancient magic that even top royal sorcerers have never used before. He made it rain on the evil dragon, obliterating it in the process. This feat made all that saw marvel. The evil vampire lady gave up, sucked on the blood of those around her, and retreated. The kingdom lost her king and the chivalric order that defended the city, but the good part is no harm came to the inhabitants of the royal capital, since there were no witnesses to what had appeared in the sky. The enemy's goal remained shrouded in the dark till later on. A month later, we see the adventuring trio going on quests. Even when Luck tried neglecting responsibility, the hero Eric explained to him that they both had great power to serve the powerless. But Luck never imagined himself a hero. Not until 10 years later, when he would make his 10-year-long last stand against the Magian and would be immortalized and remembered as a true hero, the legendary sage of Mandar and the Archduke of the kingdom, protecting the kingdom from its strongest and evilest foes. It is quite a ridiculous story, but a truly great one. A 19-year-old dropout sorcerer becoming the savior of the world. It starts with a day like any other for Locke and his ever-growing family. It's afternoon, and Milka does her bit for the family by making lunch. She calls Cerise to have lunch, but her adopted big sister opts to wait until Shia returns home. Philly also chooses to eat after doing her research for the day. As for the others, they must be having a meeting in Locke's room. Just then, Cerise notices someone coming into the estate. It seems they have a visitor. Meanwhile, at the meeting in Locke's room, Gollin is asked about his findings concerning the evil god and vampire movements. Even though he's assigned 3 rank parties for the assignment, Gollin still bemoans the lack of results. Assigning 3 rank parties shows just how dangerous the task is. King Eric admits that even the Privy Council is finding it difficult to understand the plans of the vampires. On one hand, it seems like they've been planning this for a long time, but on the other, some of their attacks make it seem like they're prematurely carrying out their plans. Eric and Gollin also believe that Locke's return may be responsible for their impatient actions, given that his return largely coincided with their actions. Locke just wonders why the Magian ruler attempted to return to the world. In the end, Locke suggests that the Magian ruler must have been summoned by the vampires. Eric and Gollin don't completely agree that the vampires would do something like that. They usually summon evil gods. Eric also points out that they've ignored one crucial factor so far. It's been mentioned that there's a being who controls the vampires. This means that there might be a vampire boss they aren't aware of yet. Just then, Gollin remembers that a rank sorcerer with strong magic resistance, who once got close to the enemy's hideout, revealed that he felt controlled by a powerful charm even though there was no direct contact. The sorcerer must have been charmed by feeling their presence from a distance. According to Gollin, the sorcerer has previously fought a vampire High Lord. This confirms Locke's suspicion that a higher power than the High Lord exists. Just then, someone knocks at the door, and it's Shia's father, Lord Danton Walcott. Lord Walcott exchanges pleasantries with them and appreciates Locke for taking care of his daughter. He is delighted after he hears that Shia helps Locke just as he helps her. Lord Walcott also greets Lord Gollin and King Eric. He's particularly surprised to see King Eric talking with Locke as a friend would. Rumors have flown around about Locke's closeness to the king, but he didn't imagine it would be this close. Lord Walcott moves on to the reason he's at Locke's home. He calls in his younger daughter Nia, an 8-year-old beastfolk who looks like a younger Shia. He reveals that Nia is here to train as a hunter under Shia's guidance. It seems early, but Lord Walcott reveals that Shia started to train around Nia's age. Shia hurries in while Lord Walcott is still speaking. She greets her father and sister and then asks what the visit is about. Initially, Shia isn't comfortable with the idea of training her sister while still in training herself. Locke cuts in and insists that she will learn while training her sister, and from her lessons with Cerise, she will surely make an excellent teacher. Locke offers to assist Shia in training her sister, which makes Lord Walcott very grateful. Since the beastfolk are natural enemies of vampires, Locke concludes that the benefits of training Nia will be great. In the end, Shia accepts to train her sister, and Locke has a new addition to his family. A while later, Locke sets out on an adventure with Nia, Shia, and some others. Lucilla and the divine Gerberga watch over the house. Locke receives a request to exterminate some goblins found somewhere around the mountains close to the royal capital. Nia is not completely used to the life of an adventurer, like how adventurers have to sleep uncomfortably at times. Shia uses the mission to begin Nia's training as she teaches Nia how to read maps and track down targets. Due to the training, they end up taking a few detours on the way. Thankfully, their mission isn't an urgent one, or at least they think so. They eventually get to the location and find out that it's an ancient ruin which had remained undetected until this moment. They're greeted by the goblins immediately after they enter the ruins. Luckily, it's an easy fight for Locke and his companions. Shia and others use coordinated attacks to open up a path through the goblins. Cerise and Shia can easily charge at the hobgoblin right after, effectively ending the battle in a matter of minutes. After the battle, they count and find out that 15 goblins were taken down. Locke confirms this from his wolf garb that all the goblins are gone. All that remains is to extract their magical stone. The mission should be over, but Locke still wonders what the goblins or anyone could be using the ancient ruins for. While still talking, the temperature suddenly gets a lot hotter. Locke sees approaching flames and uses his magic to stop the flames from hurting any of them. He notices that they're magical flames and are still coming in hot. He must do something or they'll run out of oxygen soon. While he initially planned to wait until the enemy presented an opening, the constant fire means that Locke must use his counter immediately. He uses Magic Gale to push back all the fire to its source, effectively saving himself and his companions. He immediately instructs them to exit the ruins as quickly as possible. While running, they notice that the source of the magical flames that nearly killed them is a dragon. Now, a dragon is a rare sight to see, but it's said that Lucilla had once generated a dragon through illusion magic. Illusion magic is easier to cast when the object is more realistic, which means casting a dragon through the magic must have been difficult for someone like Lucilla who had never seen one. However, one who hasn't seen that monster might not be able to determine whether it's real or an illusion. This must be why Cerise couldn't tell if Lucilla's dragon was real or fake. However, Locke could tell that the dragon was an illusion, which means he must have seen a dragon before and maybe even fought against one. Back at the ancient ruins, everyone looks scared after sighting the dragon, everyone except for Locke, who looks excited. Locke mutters that it's a great ancient dragon, a rare sight for anyone. The others hope that the dragon is simply illusion magic, but Locke quickly dashes their hopes by saying a live dragon is indeed living very close to the royal capital. Locke steadies himself to fight the dragon by activating strength and physique. He dodges the flames directed towards him by the dragon, and he jumps high and lands a good blow on the creature. The dragon retaliates by using magic flame breath again, which Locke counters by activating his solid ice technique, a magical ice that can't be easily broken down or melted. The dragon senses its defeat and tries to escape, but Locke activates a barrier that prevents it from going away. After winning the battle against the great ancient dragon, Locke offers to let the dragon off the hook if it concedes defeat. The dragon concedes defeat to Locke, and the others are surprised that the creature can speak in human language. As promised, Locke uses the spell to free the dragon. After that, he asks why the dragon is at the ancient ruins, and the creature reveals that the ancient ruins are a dragon sanctuary. According to the dragon, dragons used concealment magic to conceal the location before it was broken by the goblin horde, which is why the dragon came back at that moment to reclaim the place. This meant that the flame Locke stopped moments ago was intended to wipe out the goblins. The dragon expresses surprise at seeing a powerful goblin like Locke. They're surprised that the dragon would think they're goblins. The dragon says differentiating goblins and humans is difficult as they both walk on 2 feet and have noses in the middle of their faces. Wow, racist dragon, huh? Shia compares it to dragons being mistaken for huge lizards, and the dragon now understands that there might be a difference after all. Locke reveals that they came to the ruins to exterminate the goblin horde, and that the dragon flames would have killed all the adventurers if he wasn't there that time. Nia is particularly worried about encountering something so scary on her first adventure. but Locke assures her that being in the face of dragon danger isn't a normal Tuesday for them. The dragon remains surprised that humans could be as powerful as Locke, saying he was totally beaten by the sorcerer. They point out that not all humans are this strong, so the dragon must be careful while spreading his flame next time. Locke is concerned about the dragon calling the ruins a sanctuary, asking if there is something important that the dragon seeks to protect. The dragon says that the place is simply of historical and cultural value. Even though some of the dragons don't mind, this one has personally decided to preserve the ancient ruins. Since the ruins need to be hidden to be preserved, Locke takes them outside and uses a concealment spell to make the place disappear again. The dragon admits that Locke's magic is even greater than the magic of dragons, which should ordinarily be disgraceful to dragons. The dragon also confirms to Locke that there are other dragon ruins close to where humans live. With the increase in the desecration of the ruins, the dragon decides to patrol the place for now. Locke doesn't mind, but he says that the dragon must inform him about any goblins that need to be exterminated close to the royal capital. This is because the army would be mobilized if they saw a dragon wreaking havoc close to the royal capital. He tells the dragon to contact him by using a smoke signal or anything that would grab his attention. The dragon agrees to this plan and introduces itself as Kith, admitting that it's grateful for meeting this set of humans. First, Locke, Shia, Cerise, Nia, and Garb also introduce themselves to the dragon, and then the ancient creature flies away to begin its patrol. Nia makes joyful noises to indicate their triumph, and she explains that it's customary for the beast folk tribe to make a cry of triumph after achieving a great victory. She invites her sister to join in, but Shia doesn't seem too enthusiastic. After all, Locke defeated the dragon, not them. Locke cuts in and reminds Shia that they also succeeded in exterminating a horde of goblins that day. In the end, they all do the customary victory chant before heading home. After a few days, Locke is finally home again. Thankfully, his house has remained in order, as he learned that Galen frequently checked to make sure everything was all right. Milka also informs Locke that Galen is around at the moment. After exchanging pleasantries, Locke tells Galen everything about the mission, including the great ancient dragon. He tells Galen about how he came to a compromise with Kith, but Galen doesn't completely believe that the dragon is on their side. While he trusts Locke's words, he also points out that it could be a risk because of how much terror a dragon could bring to their people. Locke understands Galen's point of view, so he decides to ask the dragon to stay away from the royal capital the next time they meet. Later on, Locke goes to meet Philly, who's doing her research. She's been so busy that she didn't notice his presence. When Locke asks about the laboratory, Philly admits that it's a very good one and she's satisfied with it. She admits that she gets so buried in her research and needs Milka to remind her to do other things at times. Locke says that being locked up in there at all times might not be the best for her, so he invites her to take a trip together around town. She interprets Locke's invitation as an asking out, which makes her blush a lot. Imagine her surprise when she finds out that Locke just wants to get groceries and intends to take everyone along with him. While he's there, Locke wants to know what she's working on. She reveals that it's a talisman, which comes from her wondering whether it's possible to resist a High Lord's charm. According to her, she used alchemy with a sage stone to create the talisman, although she says it still requires a priest's blessing. Locke knows how difficult it is to craft a sage stone, as even the royal palace alchemists produce one a year. Philly insists that crafting the stone isn't difficult as long as the materials are available. This opens Locke's eyes to just how good she is. He calls her a national treasure that he must guard. Later that evening, they go on their walk to get the groceries. Some men in the town look at Philly while she passes, but Locke makes sure they stop, giving Philly wrong ideas and making her blush again. They pay for the items using 500 locks, as the lock is the new currency denomination that was introduced in honor of Locke's achievements alongside the statue commissioned by King Eric. Meanwhile, at the royal palace, Queen Levi is alerted that the royal capital's barrier has been broken. Word spreads quickly, and an emergency meeting of all the rankers in the capital is called. There's only one objective of the meeting: hunt the ancient dragon. At this point, the entire royal capital is thrown into a state of chaos after hearing about and even seeing the dragon on the loose. Locke clenches his teeth in frustration as he understands that Kith is the reason for the chaos in the capital. Kith is in the air just above the city, calling out Locke's name. Locke asks Ariel and Jeannie to escort his family back home safely, but Gerberga wants to tag along. Locke, Garb, Gerberga, and Nia go on this impromptu mission. According to Nia, her sister had to inform the guild about the situation immediately. Meanwhile, King Eric receives the news of the chaos in his city caused by the dragon's presence. The king instructs to send out the chivalric order, just as Locke previously suspected. He also asks for his holy sword. King Eric wants his army to be ready and his citizens to be moved to safety, but if it comes to it, he plans to take on the dragon himself. Just then, a follow-up report on the case comes in. The recent report says the dragon left the city while in pursuit of someone called Locke. Meanwhile, Locke had gone ahead of Nia and the others to meet the dragon, so when Nia gets to his location, she is surprised to see Locke talking with the dragon instead of exchanging blows. According to Locke, Kith found some ruins occupied by goblins immediately after leaving, since it was close to the capital. As they agreed, Kith decided to inform Locke about the ruins instead of taking action. What the dragon doesn't realize is that the whole point of not confronting the goblins is to avoid chaos in the city. Locke asks why he wasn't just contacted through a smoke signal, but the dragon insists that he never would have noticed a smoke signal. Locke warns Kith to avoid causing that sort of commotion in the city in the future. Back to the matter at hand, Kith offers to take Locke and his companions to the ancient ruins. Riding on a dragon's back is scary, and Nia can't hide her fear while on the dragon. When Kith speeds up, it takes Locke's magical barrier to prevent the others from falling off the dragon's back. They get to the ruins in no time, and just as Kith said, there are goblins around the place. It looks like Kith has truly learned to differentiate between humans and goblins. Locke asks Nia for her analysis, and the little Beastfoot girl says that 3 goblins on the outlook indicate that there should be close to 30 goblins inside. If the goblin horde is that many, Nia suggests that they might be led by a hobgoblin or even a goblin magician. All right, his little sister is a quick learner. Since it's confirmed, Kith now intends to go inside and roast the entire goblin horde, literally. However, Locke objects, saying that there still might be captured people in the ruins who might die alongside the goblins. Locke says they must work their way into the ruins using both intellect and brute force, making sure that the people don't get hurt alongside the goblins. Locke leaves Kith outside while he goes in with Nia and the others. They make light work of the goblins they see around, defeating every one of them without breaking a sweat. From the footsteps, Nia confirms to Locke that 20 goblins have come to battle. Nia can also tell from the foot size that they are goblin lords. However, there were no footprints at the entrance, and it's well established that goblin lords cannot fly. Locke thinks that there's a possibility that the enemy is using a full-length mirror that has now turned into a 2-way magic door for transportation. This means that there's a possibility the enemies used teleportation magic. Locke instructs Garb to slowly and carefully return to the entrance to meet Kith. He can barely finish talking before he has to block an incoming sneak attack with his sword. The vampire responsible for the attack is impressed that a human would have such a good reaction time, but Locke talks down to the vampire, calling him a lesser vampire, and saying blocking his surprise attack wasn't difficult at all. The vampire is enraged and moves to attack, but Locke makes good use of his unstable emotion and quickly cuts his foe. While dying on the ground, the vampire calls out to his comrade to finish the battle. It's a goblin lord that moves in to attack Locke and Nia. It's a nice effort, but in the end, both the vampire and the goblin lord fall to Locke's blade. The vampire decides to use its last strength to attack while Locke is distracted, but the divine comes out and crows. The noise comes out as some form of magic that completely vanquishes the enemies. The downside, though, is that the divine cock's crow is very loud and might have been heard throughout the ruins and even outside. Nia asks why Locke keeps heading inside of the ruins instead of outside. Locke reveals that he's worried about their teleportation equipment and must check it out. Besides, now that they've heard the divine cry, he's decided to exterminate everyone there. They get to a spacious room and meet a vampire trying to teleport away, so Locke throws his blade straight through the vampire's chest before he can do anything else. Locke finishes him off with the draining touch skill. The other vampire in the room rushes at Locke, but Locke can easily evade his attack. After evading the attack, Locke discovers that the vampire is only looking to destroy the mirror for some reason. However, someone stops the vampire's blade in midair, and it's not Locke or Nia. The vampire's countenance is that of surprise. He asks this strange person why she's there, saying that something might happen to the queen. Meanwhile, Nia picks up a familiar scent from their new foe that she can't exactly interpret. This strange person steps up and addresses Locke, saying she's ready to face him. As she stands there, you sense a narrative tension building, a silent question hanging in the air, awaiting its turn.